Tonight, we journey into the green heart of the ancient Maya world, where mist gathers over limestone temples, where ceiba trees rise like pillars between earth and heaven, and where the jungle seems to breathe with the memory of kings. Beneath the black canopy of Central America, where insects sing in the darkness and rainwater slides from leaf to leaf, there once stood cities of white stone, painted red, blue, and gold, cities that glittered beneath the sun and watched the stars with a patience almost beyond human imagining. The Maya did not merely look at the sky, they read it. They watched the moon swell and fade. They tracked the movements of Venus as it vanished into the glare of dawn and returned like a burning omen above the horizon. They measured the solar year with extraordinary precision. They carved dates into stone that reached backward into mythic time and forward into ages no living person could ever hope to see. To later observers, it seemed as though they had predicted the future, as though they had opened some hidden doorway in time itself. And then, in many of their greatest cities, the voices stopped. The royal inscriptions grew fewer. The stelae ceased to rise in the plazas. Thrones were left empty. Palaces were abandoned. Reservoirs cracked beneath pitiless skies. In the southern lowlands, where towering centers such as Tikal, Copan, Calakmul, Palenque, and dozens of lesser-known cities had once shaped a world of ceremony, warfare, astronomy, and sacred kingship, silence gradually fell. The question is not simply why they vanished. The deeper question is how such brilliance, such mathematical grace, such religious intensity, and such architectural ambition could have flourished so powerfully in a landscape that could also become so unforgiving. For centuries, outsiders misunderstood them. Early travelers walking through the vine-strangled ruins imagined lost tribes, wandering philosophers, or mysterious peoples disconnected from the living Maya communities around them. The temples were treated as puzzles, the glyphs as decoration, the empty plazas as evidence of disappearance. But modern archaeology has changed the story. Through stratigraphic excavation, researchers have uncovered the layered lives of Maya cities, not as frozen monuments, but as living organisms. Beneath palace floors, they have found earlier buildings, older shrines, offerings, burials, renovations, and the careful rebuilding of sacred space through generations. Radiocarbon dating has anchored these discoveries in time, showing long sequences of growth, crisis, adaptation, and decline. Lithic analysis has revealed the movement of obsidian blades across vast trade networks, proof of exchange, diplomacy, and competition. Genomic data has begun to trace the deep continuities of Maya populations, reminding us that the people did not disappear like smoke. They endured. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. In the dense forests of Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, the earth still covers roads, terraces, reservoirs, causeways, temples, and houses. Modern remote sensing has revealed landscapes far more crowded and complex than earlier generations imagined. What once seemed like isolated ceremonial centers are now understood as cities embedded in managed environments, linked by routes, fields, wetlands, and defensive works. The jungle was not simply wilderness around the Maya world. In many places, it grew over the remains of a civilization that had carefully shaped it. Imagine, for a moment, the dawn in a Maya city at the height of its power. The air is wet and cool. Smoke rises from hearths in common houses beyond the central plaza. Corn dough is patted into shape by practiced hands. Dogs move between doorways. Children wake to the sound of grinding stones. Far above them, on the summit of a temple, priests observe the brightening sky. The eastern horizon glows pale, then amber, then fierce gold. A conch shell sounds. The city stirs. Nobles prepare for ceremony. Scribes mix pigments. Traders arrange jade, shells, cacao, feathers, salt, cotton, and obsidian. Farmers walk toward fields cut from forest, toward terraces and low wetlands, toward the fragile abundance that feeds kings and commoners alike. And above all of them, time moves. For the Maya, time was not an empty road. It had texture, weight, pattern, and sacred rhythm. Days carried personalities, cycles repeated and interlocked. The calendar was not merely a tool for planting and harvesting, though it did that as well. It was a divine architecture, a way of placing human life within the movement of creation. To be born on a certain day mattered. To go to war on a certain day mattered. To dedicate a temple, crown a ruler, perform a bloodletting, or bury a king. Each act belonged to a wider cosmic order. This is why the Maya fascination with the future has so captivated the modern mind. Yet their predictions were not simple fortune-telling. They were built from observation, calculation, memory, and belief. Their astronomers watched repeating movements in the heavens and connected them to repeating patterns in ritual life. Their scribes preserved dynastic histories on stone and bark paper. Their rulers claimed authority not only through force, but through mastery of sacred time. To rule was to stand between worlds. The king was not merely a politician. He was a performer of cosmic duty, a blood-giver, a war leader, an ancestor in waiting, a living axis between gods and mortals. On carved monuments, rulers appear in heavy regalia, surrounded by serpents, divine beings, captives, and celestial signs. These were not empty symbols. They were declarations that power, time, warfare, and the supernatural belonged together. And yet, the same system that gave the Maya world its grandeur may also have sharpened its vulnerabilities. Cities competed for prestige. Dynasties fought for legitimacy. Forests were cleared. Fields expanded. Reservoirs maintained. Populations grew, and the demands of ritual and rulership became heavier. When droughts came, when alliances fractured, when divine kings failed to bring rain or victory, faith in the old order may have trembled. The Maya collapse was not a single night of fire. It was not one invading army sweeping everything away. It was not a simple vanishing. It was a long unraveling, uneven, regional, human, and haunting. Some cities fell, others endured. Some traditions faded, others crossed centuries in the far north. New centers rose even as southern kingdoms weakened. In villages and towns, families continued to plant corn, speak Maya languages, honor ancestors, and remember sacred landscapes. So the mystery is not that the Maya vanished. The mystery is that so many of their cities were left behind, while their descendants continued to live beneath the same sun, in the same broad region, carrying fragments of an ancient world through conquest, conversion, resistance, and survival. Tonight, beneath the shadow of pyramids and the slow turning of stars, we enter a civilization that measured time on a scale both intimate and immense. We follow the carved dates, the broken monuments, the buried offerings, the dry lake beds, the palace stairways, and the voices of scribes who once believed that memory could be made permanent in stone. Still, only time will tell what future discoveries will be made. Beneath roots and rainfall, beneath collapsed masonry and sleeping earth, there may yet be another inscription, another tomb, another city, another clue waiting in darkness. And perhaps, as we listen, the ancient Maya are not gone at all. Perhaps they are still speaking, quietly, through the calendar stones, through the stars, through the descendants who remain, and through the vast silence of cities that should have been forgotten, but were not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And wherever you are listening from tonight, whether it is morning, evening, or the deep quiet hours past midnight, tell us your location and your local time. It is always a strange and beautiful thing to know where in the world these old stories are finding new ears. The first great rediscovery of the ancient Maya cities did not arrive like a thunderclap. It came slowly, through heat, rumor, sickness, stubborn curiosity, and the sound of machetes striking green walls of vegetation. Men moved through forests so dense that daylight arrived in fragments. Their clothes clung to their skin. Their boots sank into mud. Parrots screamed above them. Mosquitoes rose in black clouds from stagnant pools. Somewhere ahead, hidden behind vines and strangler figs, stone waited. To the people who lived near these ruins, the ancient places were not truly lost. Farmers, hunters, guides, and local communities knew of mounds in the forest, carved stones by old trails, and temples rising like hills under roots and earth. The idea of a lost city often belongs more to outsiders than to the land itself. Yet to the wider world, these places remained veiled, known only through fragments, colonial reports, local memory, and stories of abandoned stone houses swallowed by jungle. In the 19th century, explorers began to carry these stories outward. Among the most famous were John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood, whose journeys through Central America in the 1830s and 1840s transformed the study of the Maya. Stephens wrote with the astonishment of a man who had entered a world no European imagination had properly prepared him for. Catherwood drew what he saw with extraordinary precision, rendering temples, stairways, sculpted panels, and solemn faces in stone. Their published accounts carried the ruins into parlors, libraries, and museums across the Atlantic world. Imagine Catherwood standing before a carved stela at Copan, his paper damp in the forest air, his hand following the impossible density of its design. The figure on the stone is not a crude idol, not a random ornament, not the work of a people without history. It is regal, layered, intentional. Every curve of headdress, every glyphic block, every serpent mouth and jeweled belt seems to belong to a language of authority. The jungle presses close, but the stone refuses silence. Here was the first great tell. The ruins were not the scattered remains of a primitive tribe. They were the work of city builders, mathematicians, artists, astronomers, engineers, scribes, and kings. Their world had structure, their monuments had messages, their architecture had memory. At Palenque, white limestone buildings rose against steep green hills, their roof combs once catching the sun like crowns. At Uxmal, Facades were dressed in intricate stone mosaics, with masks of rain gods repeated across walls in rhythmic abundance. At Tikal, temples pierced the forest canopy, their summits towering above the green sea as if the city itself had tried to climb toward the heavens. At Copan, stairways, altars, and sculptures told of rulers and rituals in a language no one could yet read. Archaeology would spend generations learning how to listen. The early age of exploration often mixed wonder with destruction. Monuments were cleared, copied, removed, sometimes damaged. The jungle was treated as an enemy to be cut away, not as part of the long story of abandonment and return. Yet from these imperfect beginnings came questions that refused to die. Who built these cities? When did they flourish? Why had so many been left behind? What did the carved signs mean? Were the temples tombs, observatories, palaces, or stages for divine ceremony? The answers required more than romance. They required method. In time, archaeology turned from treasure hunting toward disciplined investigation. Stratigraphic excavation became essential. Instead of simply clearing impressive buildings, researchers studied layers of occupation, soil changes, construction phases, refuse deposits, hearths, floors, burials, and offerings. A temple was no longer just a temple. It became a stack of decisions. A pyramid could contain earlier pyramids within it, each one sealed and covered by the next, like memory folded inside memory. At Tikal, excavation revealed a city of immense depth, with roots reaching far earlier than its tallest temples might suggest. Beneath later plazas lay earlier platforms, burials, and architectural forms. The city was not born complete. It accumulated. It rose by repetition, reverence, ambition, and labor. Each generation inherited sacred space and remade it, refusing to erase the past completely, yet constantly burying it beneath new stone. Radiocarbon dating gave this buried history a firmer clock. Charcoal from construction fill, organic remains from sealed contexts, and samples from occupation layers helped anchor the growth of Maya settlements across centuries. The results showed long development, not sudden appearance. Villages expanded into towns. Towns became cities. Ceremonial centers grew into royal capitals. The Maya world was not a single empire, but a network of competing kingdoms, each with its own court, alliances, rivalries, and sacred claims. Then came the breakthrough of writing. For a long time, Maya glyphs were thought by many scholars to be mostly symbolic or calendrical, beautiful signs without full phonetic life. That assumption began to collapse as researchers identified patterns, names, titles, dates, and sounds. The inscriptions, once mute to outsiders, began to speak. They did not tell only of gods and time. They told of births, accessions, marriages, captures, wars, sacrifices, deaths, and dynastic memory. The stones had been historical documents all along. This changed everything. A carved monument in a plaza could now become a royal announcement. A stairway could become a chronicle. A temple panel could become a voice from a courtly world of ambition, grief, triumph, and fear. Kings who had once been anonymous became individuals with names and rivals. Cities that had seemed isolated became entangled in diplomacy and conflict. The ancient Maya were no longer an abstract civilization. They were people moving through events. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, another revolution came from above. Aircraft and remote sensing technologies began to peer through the forest canopy. LIDAR, using laser pulses to map the ground beneath vegetation, revealed roads, terraces, reservoirs, defensive walls, platforms, and vast patterns of settlement that the human eye could barely detect from the forest floor. Landscapes once imagined as sparse became dense with human modification. The jungle was full of architecture hiding in plain sight. This was a second great tell. The empty forest was not empty. The silence was crowded. Causeways stretched between civic centers. Agricultural features marked the earth. Water systems showed planning and engineering. Defensive construction suggested fear, conflict, and political tension. The Maya lowlands appeared not as scattered ceremonial islands, but as a deeply inhabited world, altered by countless hands over many generations. Yet the work remains difficult. The forest is not a passive curtain. It is alive, patient, and powerful. Roots crack masonry. Rain dissolves plaster. Termites, fungi, and humidity wear away what stone and stucco once preserved. Looters cut tunnels into pyramids. Modern development, farming, climate change, and illegal trade threaten fragile sites. Every discovery arrives with urgency, because every year takes something back. Still, in the thick green darkness, archaeology continues. A shard of painted pottery can reveal trade, taste, ritual, and domestic life. A burial can reveal status, diet, disease, and ancestry. A reservoir bed can reveal drought. A blade of obsidian can reveal distant exchange. A carved glyph can restore the name of a ruler who has been waiting more than 1,000 years to be heard. The Maya cities were rediscovered not in one moment, but through a long conversation between local knowledge, exploration, science, and the endurance of stone. Each temple pulled from the forest is not merely a ruin, it is an argument against forgetting. It tells us that the past is not dead ground beneath our feet. It is layered, watching, and sometimes, when the light falls correctly across an inscription, it speaks. There are stones in the Maya world that seem to hold time captive. They stand in plazas, weathered by rain and heat, their faces crowded with kings, gods, serpents, ornaments, captives, and glyphs. Some are broken. Some lean beneath the weight of centuries. Some were buried deliberately. Others were left standing as the forest closed around them. To the passing eye, they may appear to be monuments of power, declarations in limestone, proud markers of vanished courts. Yet within their carved surfaces, the Maya placed something far stranger than royal pride. They placed dates, not vague memories, not legends floating without anchor. Exact dates, fixed within interlocking systems of astonishing sophistication. A birth, a coronation, a battle, a ritual, a death, a dedication, a moment in the life of a city, bound to cycles of days and divine forces, set into stone so that it could be recognized not merely by the living, but by descendants, ancestors, and gods. This is one reason the Maya have so often been imagined as prophets. Their calendars reached across immense stretches of time. Their inscriptions could refer backward to mythic beginnings and forward to ritual anniversaries beyond the lifespan of any ruler. Their scribes understood cycles within cycles, like wheels turning inside other wheels, each one bringing a day into a different relationship with sacred order. To modern minds, the future often feels like empty space. It is unwritten, uncertain, waiting to happen. To Maya timekeepers, the future was not empty. It was patterned. Days returned with qualities, burdens, powers, and echoes. A date was not simply a number. It was a living position inside a cosmic design. The Maya calendar system was not one calendar, but several moving together. There was the ritual cycle of 260 days, a sacred count formed from the combination of numbered days and named days. It was used for divination, ceremony, naming, and the interpretation of destiny. There was also the solar cycle of 365 days, tied to seasonal movement, agricultural rhythm, and annual ritual. These two cycles interlocked, producing a longer repetition in which a particular combination of ritual and solar dates returned only after many years. For human life, this was meaningful. For a ruler, it could transform a ceremony into a return of sacred pattern. Then there was the long count. The long count was the deep clock, the instrument by which the Maya fixed events in historical time over vast spans. It counted days from a mythic starting point, placing events within an immense chronological framework. To carve a long count date was to announce that a particular moment belonged not only to a local dynasty, but to the architecture of creation itself. Imagine a scribe preparing such an inscription. He does not work casually. The surface has been chosen. The patron is powerful. The date is important. The stonecutter waits for the design. The scribe, trained in signs, numbers, and sacred order, knows that error is not merely technical. It is dangerous. The wrong date would misplace the event in cosmic memory. So the numbers are counted, the day name is confirmed, the solar position is marked, the Lord's titles are arranged. The event is set in relation to ancestry, divine sanction, and the deep procession of time. Then the chisel begins. Tap by tap, the day enters stone. The Maya number system made this possible with elegant clarity. They used a place value system, and they possessed a concept of zero, represented visually in several ways, often as a shell-like sign. This was not a small achievement. Zero is one of the great intellectual tools in human history. It allows absence to become meaningful in calculation. It gives structure to empty positions. It permits numbers to grow in organized scale. Within Maya inscriptions, zero was not an abstract curiosity. It was part of a working mathematical system tied to astronomy, ritual, and history. The stones did not predict the future in the way modern rumor sometimes claims. They did something more subtle and perhaps more profound. They revealed a civilization that believed the future could be understood through rhythm. Venus would return. Eclipses could be anticipated. Sacred anniversaries would come again. The same-day signs would circle back, bearing remembered qualities. Past events could be placed beside present ones, and present events could be projected toward future commemorations. This is not superstition alone. It is observation disciplined by generations. A farmer understands cycles because corn demands it. A priest understands cycles because ceremony depends on it. An astronomer understands cycles because the sky displays them. A king uses cycles because power seeks permanence. The Maya brought these forms of knowledge into a shared structure. Their calendars touched field, temple, palace, household, and tomb. One of the most captivating elements of Maya timekeeping is the attention paid to Venus. To the naked eye, Venus is one of the brightest objects in the sky. It appears as morning star or evening star, vanishes, then returns. Many ancient peoples watched it, but Maya astronomers treated its movements with exceptional seriousness. In surviving records, the cycle of Venus was calculated and associated with ritual timing, warfare, and omen. Its appearance was not merely beautiful, it could be dangerous, charged with divine force. Picture the eastern horizon before dawn. The city is still dark. The plaza stones hold the cool of night. On a temple summit, a watcher waits beneath the final stars. Then a fierce point of light rises just ahead of the sun. It is Venus, sharp as a blade, bright enough to command attention even from those who fear its meaning. Below, the city sleeps, but the priests have already read the sky. A date has arrived. A ceremony may be required. A ruler may prepare to act. The heavens have spoken in pattern, not in words. Eclipses, too, belong to the realm of patterned fear. The sudden darkening of sun or moon could unsettle any society, yet careful observers knew that such events were not random. Through accumulated records, Maya astronomers developed ways of anticipating eclipse seasons. Their knowledge was not perfect in the modern scientific sense, but it was extraordinary within the tools available to them. No telescope, no metal instruments of European design, no printed tables circulating across continents, only eyes, memory, painted books, teachers, apprentices, and centuries of disciplined attention. The codices, those rare surviving screenfold books, offer a glimpse of this intellectual world. Most Maya books were destroyed or lost, victims of climate, conquest, zealotry, decay, and fire. Those that remain are precious, not because they give a complete library, but because they prove such libraries once existed, painted on bark paper, covered with figures, numbers, gods, animals, and calendar tables. They show a world in which writing, art, mathematics, and divination were inseparable. The tragedy is almost unbearable. A civilization that recorded time with such care had so much of its own recorded memory destroyed. Whole histories may have vanished in smoke. Astronomical tables, genealogies, rituals, medical knowledge, songs, myths, tribute lists, and local records may have disappeared forever. What survives is magnificent, but fragmentary. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. The carved stones continue to resist oblivion. When a Maya monument gives a date, it offers more than information. It offers a mood, a worldview, a human longing to defeat disappearance. The ruler knows he will die. The scribe knows his hand will become dust. The city itself may fall, though no one wishes to imagine it. But if the date is carved deeply enough, if the monument stands long enough, if the gods are willing, then the moment may survive. And it has? Across more than 1,000 years, those dates still speak. They tell us that the Maya were not wandering dreamers staring vaguely at the heavens. They were precise, patient, and intellectually daring. They joined mathematics to myth, astronomy to politics, ritual to memory. They made time visible. They gave it shape. They dressed it in glyphs and raised it in the plazas of their cities. So when people say the Maya predicted the future, the truth is both less simple and more wondrous. They did not escape time. They studied it. They honored it. They feared it. They believed it had a pulse, and they listened. In the movement of Venus, in the return of sacred days, in the long count of ages, They found not certainty, but pattern, and in pattern they found meaning. In the green darkness of the Maya world, legend did not live far away from daily life. It was not sealed inside temples, nor reserved only for priests and kings. It moved through fields, hearths, caves, rivers, mountains, and the wet breath of the forest. It lived in the crackle of fire at night, in the low voice of an elder, in the painted image on a vessel, in the story of a divine ancestor who once walked the earth when the world was still being shaped. For the ancient Maya, the landscape itself was alive with memory. A mountain was not merely stone, a cave was not merely a hollow in the earth, a spring was not only water. These places could be entrances, mouths, thresholds, sacred openings into the hidden layers of creation. The visible world rested beside an unseen one, and the boundary between them was thin. At dawn, when mist moved through the trees and the temples emerged slowly from shadow, it must have seemed entirely possible that gods and mortals still shared the same air. Maya stories carried this sense of nearness. Creation was not a distant abstraction. It was an unfinished drama, repeated through ritual, farming, birth, death, and rulership. Human beings had obligations because the world itself had been made through sacrifice, struggle, and divine intention. Corn was not simply food, it was identity, flesh, ancestry, and promise. To plant it was to participate in a sacred pattern far older than any city. To grind it, cook it, and share it was to sustain both household and cosmos. In painted scenes, carved panels, and later preserved narratives, the gods appear as powerful, strange, and deeply involved in human existence. They are not gentle ornaments of belief. They can be creators, destroyers, tricksters, patrons, judges, and forces of fertility or danger. They dwell in celestial heights, watery depths, and dark inner places beneath the surface of the world. Their presence gives meaning to rain, drought, birth, warfare, kingship, and death. The Maya imagined reality as layered. Above was the celestial realm, bright with stars, sun, moon, and wandering planets. Beneath was a realm associated with darkness, water, ancestors, and transformation. Between these worlds stretched the human realm, fragile and luminous, where cities rose, maize grew, children were born, rulers bled, and scribes counted days. The great world tree, often imagined through the form of the ceiba, connected these levels. Its roots reached into the depths. Its trunk stood in the human world. Its branches lifted toward the heavens. Stand before a ceiba in the tropical forest, and the image needs little explanation. Its roots flare like walls from the ground. Its trunk rises pale and immense. Its crown spreads high above the undergrowth, carrying birds, insects, vines, and light. In such a tree, the Maya could see architecture before architecture, a natural temple linking realms. The city itself could echo this cosmic form, with pyramids rising like artificial mountains and plazas opening like sacred clearings beneath the sky. Caves held a particular power. To enter a cave was to leave ordinary space. The air changed first. Heat softened into damp coolness. Sound became intimate. Footsteps echoed. Torches pushed trembling light across mineral walls. Stalactites hung overhead like teeth or frozen rain. Water dripped slowly, each drop sounding louder than it should. Deep within, offerings were placed. Ceramic vessels, incense burners, stone tools, shells, Bones and traces of ritual movement have been found in such places, signs of human approach toward the unknown. Caves were connected to rain, fertility, ancestors, and the forces beneath the earth. In a land where rainfall could decide the fate of communities, where reservoirs had to be filled and maize had to survive, such places were not symbols only. They were urgent. The sacred was also practical. A prayer for rain was a prayer for children, harvest, storage, health, and survival. A ceremony in darkness could be an act of hope against hunger. Water, too, possessed sacred weight. In the limestone lowlands, surface rivers could be rare, and water often moved through hidden channels, sinkholes, and underground chambers. Natural wells were not simply convenient features. They were portals of life. Some received offerings of jade, pottery, incense, animals, and human bodies. Such acts can trouble the modern imagination, but they belong to a world in which exchange with divine powers was serious, costly, and necessary. The gods did not receive leftovers. They received beauty, blood, breath, and value. Jade carried the color of green life. It shone like young maize, deep water, and breath itself. Shells spoke of distant seas. Obsidian glittered like night made sharp. Feathers flashed with impossible color, taken from birds whose brilliance seemed already touched by the supernatural. The materials of ritual were chosen because they carried meaning through their texture, origin, color, and rarity. A sacred object did not merely represent the world. It gathered pieces of the world into an offering. The rulers understood this deeply. A king standing in a plaza was not performing for human eyes alone. He acted in a theater watched by gods, ancestors, nobles, rivals, and commoners. His costume could transform him into something more than ordinary flesh. He might wear jade ornaments, towering headdresses, shell decorations, woven cloth, and symbols of divine beings. Through dance, bloodletting, incense, and speech, he entered a role that made political authority appear woven into the fabric of creation. Blood was central to this sacred drama. To modern ears, blood sacrifice may sound only violent, but in Maya thought blood could be the substance of life, lineage, communication, and debt. Nobles pierced their bodies in ritual acts that released precious blood onto paper, which could then be burned, sending smoke upward as a message to gods and ancestors. Pain became offering, breath became smoke, flesh became a bridge between realms. In the rising fumes, visions may have been sought, and the dead may have seemed close. The legend of kingship depended on this ability to cross boundaries. A ruler had to show that he could speak with forces beyond ordinary reach. He had to bind the city to the sacred past. He had to prove that his dynasty was not accidental, but chosen, remembered, and cosmically necessary. When carved monuments show rulers with serpents, deities, ancestors, and supernatural beings, they show power presented as revelation. The king stands at the center of visible and invisible worlds. Yet legend was not owned by rulers alone. In households outside the palace, families kept their own rituals. Ancestors were remembered beneath floors and near living spaces. Domestic shrines, figurines, incense burners, and burials reveal a quieter sacred life, one woven into cooking, sleeping, working, and raising children. The household was not separate from the cosmos. It was a smaller version of it. The hearth could echo creation. The buried dead could remain part of the family's presence, The ordinary house held mysteries of its own. This is one of the most moving truths of the Maya world. Its grandeur was not only in pyramids or royal tombs, it was in the way-meaning, saturated existence. The forest had voices, the earth had openings, the sky had signs, food had ancestry, time had personality, the dead had nearness. A city was not merely an arrangement of buildings, but a living map of sacred relationships. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. So much of Maya belief must be approached through fragments. A painted pot from a tomb, a carving on a temple wall, a cave offering left in darkness, a later story written under changed circumstances, a glyphic phrase naming a god whose full mythology has vanished. Scholars can compare, interpret, and reconstruct, but the interior life of ancient faith always withdraws at the moment we reach for it. The old songs are mostly gone. The exact tones of prayer have faded. The faces of countless storytellers are lost, and yet the legends remain in outline. Like constellations seen through cloud, they tell of a world in which humanity was not alone. They tell of divine beings who shaped existence, of sacred maze, of caves beneath the earth, of trees joining realms, of kings who opened paths to ancestors, and of families who lived with the dead beneath their floors. They tell us that the Maya did not inhabit a silent universe. They inhabited one crowded with presence. To enter that world imaginatively is to lose oneself among the myriad altars of the past. It is to hear rain on temple steps and understand that water was more than weather. It is to see smoke rising in a plaza and know that it may have carried speech toward unseen listeners. It is to look at a forested hill and wonder whether stone sleeps beneath it, whether a shrine lies hidden, whether some ancient offering remains untouched in the dark. The green world keeps its secrets well. Roots cover foundations. Moss softens carvings. Bats stir in caves where priests once walked. Rain falls into pools that may have received prayers 1,000 years ago. The modern traveler may stand in such a place and feel only beauty, but beneath that beauty lies a deeper sensation, the sense of a civilization that saw every path, tree, star, cave, and spring as part of a sacred geography, answerless, adrift to ponder. We are left with the old mystery of belief itself. Why did people build so high, carve so carefully, bleed so willingly, and count time so faithfully? Perhaps because they lived in a world where the gods were never entirely absent. Perhaps because every harvest depended on powers no human hand could command. Perhaps because memory, ritual, and story were ways of keeping the universe from falling apart. In the green dark, legend was not decoration. It was the breath of the world. The Maya sky was not empty. It was a vast, sacred machine, silent, brilliant, and terrifying in its precision. Each night it turned above the cities of stone, above the dark fields of maize, above rivers, caves, courtyards, roofs of thatch, and temple stairways still warm from the day's sun. To us, the stars can seem distant, decorative, scattered like cold sparks over a sleeping world. To the ancient Maya, they were neither distant nor decorative. They were active presences. They moved according to rhythm. They arrived on schedule. They disappeared, returned, warned, blessed, and threatened. The sky was a text, but not a simple one. It demanded patience. It demanded generations. It demanded watchers who could stand in darkness before dawn. eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a point of light to appear in precisely the right place. It demanded memory strong enough to hold patterns across decades. It demanded teachers, apprentices, calculations, corrections, painted tables, and sacred discipline. The Maya did not inherit their knowledge from a single revelation. They built it slowly, night by night, season by season. From the behavior of light, imagine a priest on a temple summit before sunrise. The city below him lies almost completely still. The last fires in the houses have sunk into embers. The air smells of damp plaster, wood smoke, and flowering plants. Frogs call from reservoirs. Insects sing in the surrounding darkness. Far beyond the plaza, the forest is a wall of shadow. Above it, the eastern horizon begins to pale. The priest waits, not as a dreamer, but as a specialist. He knows where to look. He knows what has been seen in earlier years. He knows that the moment of appearance matters. Then Venus rises. No other star announces itself in quite the same way. It is sharp, bright, and almost violent against the fading dark. It seems too brilliant to be gentle. For the Maya, Venus was bound to cycles of danger and power. It could appear as the morning star, vanish into the sun's glare, return as the evening star, and disappear once more. Its full cycle was long enough to require careful reckoning, yet regular enough to invite calculation. This made it one of the most important bodies in the Maya heavens. The surviving astronomical tables show that Maya scholars followed Venus with formidable care. Their calculations were not perfect by modern standards, but they were the achievement of naked-eye astronomy, refined through long observation. The planet's movement was woven into ritual schedules and political action. Its appearances could mark moments of tension. In some contexts, Venus seems to have been associated with warfare, attack, and ominous power. A ruler who understood the sky could time his actions to heavenly rhythm, turning politics into cosmic performance. This is a crucial point. Maya astronomy was not separate from religion, and religion was not separate from rule. The movement of celestial bodies gave structure to ceremony. Ceremony gave legitimacy to kingship. Kingship shaped the visible order of the city. In the Maya world, the heavens were not studied in isolation for curiosity alone. They were studied because the fate of communities seemed joined to them. Architecture made this relationship visible. Certain buildings were positioned in ways that framed solar events. Some alignments appear to mark solstices, equinoxes, zenith passages, or important horizon points. Across the Maya lowlands and highlands, structures were placed so that light, shadow, and sightline could bind stone to sky. A pyramid was not only a mountain made by human hands, it could be an instrument. A plaza was not only an open civic space, it could be a stage where celestial order entered public life. At sunrise on a significant day, the horizon itself became part of the building. The first edge of the sun might appear over a particular structure or landscape feature. Shadows might fall across steps, walls, or carved surfaces. People gathered in the plaza did not need written astronomical tables to feel the power of such moments. They saw stone and sun agree. They saw the built world confirm the cosmic one. The city became a clock large enough to walk through. The sun held a special place in this sacred machinery. Its daily path measured life. Its heat ripened crops and punished the careless. Its annual movement marked changing seasons, agricultural timing, and ritual obligation. But in the tropics, The sun also performed a phenomenon unfamiliar to many people living farther north or south. At certain times, it passed directly overhead. Shadows shortened until they nearly vanished. The world seemed, for a moment, to stand beneath the exact eye of heaven. Such zenith passages mattered. They could be watched, remembered, and embedded in ritual life. They offered a way of linking local geography to celestial movement. The Maya did not live beneath a generic sky. They lived beneath skies observed from specific cities, specific horizons, specific temple tops, and specific sacred landscapes. Astronomy was local as well as universal. The heavens belonged to the whole world, but they revealed themselves through particular places. The moon, too, required attention. Its phases shaped nighttime light, ritual timing, and the imagination of change. It grew from a delicate curve into a bright disk, then thinned and vanished into darkness. Its cycle was visible to everyone, yet its longer patterns required specialists. Eclipses added fear and urgency. When the moon darkened or the sun was bitten by shadow, the event could seem like a wound in the order of creation. Yet such terror was not chaos. It could be anticipated through careful pattern recognition. This is where Maya intellectual courage becomes most visible. They faced a universe alive with danger, and rather than surrender to fear, they counted, they watched, they recorded, they placed terror inside tables, they transformed recurrence into knowledge. An eclipse remained awe-inspiring, but it was no longer entirely unknowable. The sky's violence could be given rhythm. The codices revealed the intensity of this work. In their painted pages, numbers, deities, animals, and signs gather in dense arrangements. They are not simple books, in the modern sense. They are ritual instruments, repositories of calculation and omen. Their pages move between mathematics and myth without apology. A number is never merely a number. A god is never merely an illustration. A celestial event is never merely physical. Each belongs to a world where knowledge carries sacred consequence. It is tempting to divide the Maya mind into science and superstition, as though those categories explain everything. They do not. The Maya studied real celestial cycles with accuracy earned through disciplined observation. They also understood those cycles through divine presence, omen, sacrifice, and sacred obligation. Their astronomy was empirical and religious at once. To separate the two too sharply would be to misunderstand the world they inhabited. In this, they were not lesser than us. They were different. Their sky was not the empty space of modern physics. It was a populated realm, layered with beings and powers, yet their observations were real. Their calculations were real. Their architectural alignments were real. Their intellectual labor was real. They remind us that human beings have always sought order in the heavens, and that the search for pattern can arise from devotion as much as from doubt. Picture a Maya city on a night of ceremony. Torches burn along the plaza edges. Incense smoke rises in blue strands. The ruler appears in feathered splendor, his body transformed by jade, shell, cloth, and paint. Priests speak dates aloud. Musicians beat drums. The crowd watches the summit of a temple, then the sky beyond it, somewhere above. A planet reaches its appointed place. The act unfolding below is not entertainment. It is alignment, human gesture, royal power, sacred time, and celestial motion are being joined before witnesses. This was the genius of Maya public ritual. It made the invisible visible. It turned calculation into ceremony. It allowed commoners, nobles, captives, scribes, and kings to experience the heavens not as distant abstractions, but as forces entering the city. The sky did not remain above. It descended through timing, architecture, music, blood, fire, and stone. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. We do not know every observation made from every temple. We do not possess the vast library that once guided many specialists. We cannot recover every chant, every interpretation, every moment when a priest looked at a clouded horizon and feared that the sign would be missed. But enough remains to know that the Maya were among the great watchers of the ancient world. Their predictions were not magic tricks. They were the fruit of attention. In an age without telescopes, they built a civilization that could bind cities to solstices, rulers to planets, fear to eclipse tables, and memory to the turning of days. They stood beneath the same stars we see, but they listened to them differently. Where we may see distance, they saw relationship. Where we may see emptiness, they saw command. Where we may see beauty, they saw obligation. And in that sacred machine overhead, they found a mirror of human longing. To know when something will return is to soften the terror of change. To name a cycle is to resist chaos. To carve a date is to say that a life has a place in the immense design. The Maya looked upward not to escape the earth, but to understand how to live upon it. The sky gave them omens, patterns, warnings, and authority. It gave them a language of recurrence in a world where harvests failed. Kings died, enemies gathered, and children were born into uncertainty. Above the ancient cities, the stars still move. Venus still burns before dawn. The moon still fades into shadow. The sun still rises over temples, forests, fields, and broken walls. The sacred machine has not stopped. Only the old watchers have fallen silent, leaving their stones, their tables, and their alignments behind, answerless, adrift to ponder. Beneath the turning heavens, they knew so well. Corn was the quiet miracle at the center of the Maya world. Not gold, not iron, not the wheel, not some vast herd of animals pulling plows across open plains. Corn was the daily covenant, the green blade rising from dark soil, the swelling ear beneath leaves, the food that became body, memory, labor, prayer, and obligation. In the Maya imagination, human life and maize were bound so closely that to speak of one was to approach the other. The crop was not merely harvested, it was honored. It was watched with anxiety, guarded through heat, and celebrated with gratitude when the rains came on time. Yet abundance in the Maya lowlands was never simple. The landscape could appear generous to the untrained eye. Forests rose thick and brilliant. Birds flashed through the canopy. Rain fell in sheets during the wet season. Vines climbed over limestone ridges. The air smelled of wet leaves, blossoms, smoke, and earth. But beneath this beauty lay a difficult truth. Much of the lowland environment was fragile. Soils could be thin. Rivers were not always close. The bedrock was porous limestone, swallowing water into hidden channels and underground chambers. Rain could arrive with overwhelming force, then vanish for long months. To live well here required knowledge. The Maya did not simply clear forest and scatter seed. They learned the moods of land and water. They planted in different settings. They managed terraces, bajos, wetlands, uplands, orchards, gardens, and household plots. They understood the value of trees, the usefulness of shade, the timing of burning, the danger of exhaustion, and the importance of storing food. Their agriculture was not a crude assault on nature, it was a long negotiation with it. At dawn, far from the carved monuments and royal courts, the work began. A farmer stepped out from a house of wood, plaster, and thatch. The air was already warm. Smoke from the hearth lingered low. Dogs nosed at the packed earth. A child watched from the doorway. The farmer carried tools shaped not from iron, but from stone, wood, bone, and long experience. His field might lie beyond the household, reached by a path between trees heavy with fruit, medicine, fiber, and shade. He knew the sound of the soil underfoot. He knew where water lingered and where it fled. He knew which clouds promised rain and which clouds only mocked the thirsty ground. This labor made civilization possible. Every pyramid depended on fields. Every painted codex depended on surplus food. Every priest watching Venus before dawn depended on farmers who had planted, weeded, carried, stored, and endured. Every king dressed in jade and feathers stood upon a foundation of corn. The brilliance of Maya astronomy and art did not float above ordinary life. It was fed, day after day, by hands stained with soil. The crop itself demanded attention. Maize is a domesticated plant, shaped across thousands of years by human care. It does not scatter itself like a wild grass in the same way. It depends on people to plant and protect it. This mutual dependence is profound. Human beings changed maize, and maize changed human societies. It allowed denser settlement, more predictable food supplies, greater ceremonial investment, and the growth of political centers. Yet it also created vulnerability. When people depend heavily on a crop, the failure of that crop becomes a danger not only to stomachs, but to kingdoms. Rain was therefore more than weather. Rain was judgment, mercy, gift, and threat. Too little, and maize withered. Too much, and fields could be damaged. Bad timing could wound a harvest as surely as drought. The rainy season carried hope, but also uncertainty. A dark cloud gathering at the horizon might stir relief in one heart and fear in another. Thunder could sound like divine presence. Lightning could split the sky above temple and field alike. The first smell of rain on dry earth must have been one of the most powerful sensations in Maya life. Ceremonies for rain were not ornamental additions to agriculture. They were part of the emotional and spiritual economy of survival. When people carried offerings to caves, springs, hilltops, or temples, they were not merely preserving tradition. They were asking the world to continue. They were asking that children be fed, that seed become plant, that reservoirs fill, that the sky not close itself like a sealed door. Water management became one of the great practical arts of Maya civilization. In many cities, especially in regions without reliable rivers, reservoirs were essential. Rainwater had to be collected, directed, stored, and protected. Plazas, channels, dams, depressions, and plastered surfaces could all participate in the capture of seasonal water. The work required planning at household and civic scales. A city that dazzled the eye with temples also contained quieter engineering, the hidden logic of survival beneath ceremonial grandeur. Imagine the dry season in a large Maya city. The trees lose some of their softness, Dust gathers in paths. The sun hardens the plazas. Water levels sink. People walk farther or wait longer. A ruler may still appear in splendor, but the anxiety beneath the spectacle grows sharper. Each jar of water matters. Each stored measure of grain matters. Mothers watch children carefully. Farmers look toward the sky. Priests count days. The city holds its breath. Then imagine several poor rainy seasons in succession, not one bad year, which a resilient society may survive, not one failed field, which neighbors may help repair, but repeated stress, extending across years, perhaps decades, striking unevenly across regions. Reservoirs shrink, food stores decline, trade becomes more tense, tribute becomes harder to collect. Nobles demand labor even when households are strained. Rival cities smell weakness. Captives are taken. Monuments insist that kings are powerful. But cracked earth tells another story. Environmental evidence has given this drama a sharper outline. Lake sediments, cave formations, pollen records, and other climate archives suggest that parts of the Maya world experienced severe droughts during critical periods of political crisis. These records do not tell a simple tale in which drought alone destroyed civilization. Human history is rarely so obedient, but drought placed pressure on systems already crowded with ambition, rivalry, inequality, and expectation. Climate stress did not write the whole story. It tightened the cords around it. The Maya had survived dry times before. This matters. They were not helpless victims of weather. Their ancestors had adapted to difficult environments for centuries. They developed storage strategies, water systems, diverse fields, forest management, and ritual institutions to help communities endure uncertainty. The tragedy lies not in ignorance, but in scale. As populations grew and cities became more demanding, the margin for error may have narrowed. A system that works for a smaller community can become brittle when stretched across royal courts, armies, labor obligations, and dense settlement. The forest itself was part of the balance. Trees provided food, fuel, medicine, timber, shade, habitat, and soil protection. Managed forests and home gardens likely formed part of Maya subsistence, creating landscapes that were neither untouched wilderness nor simple farmland. But building cities required wood. Cooking required fuel. Lime plaster, so important for architecture and water management, required burning limestone, which consumed more wood. Expansion had costs. The gleaming whiteness of a city may have carried hidden demands upon the surrounding forest. Here the beauty of Maya civilization becomes almost painful. The white walls of temples reflected sunlight. Plastered plazas turned public space into brilliant ceremonial ground. Reservoirs shone with collected rain. Carved stones rose like fixed memory. Yet behind this radiance stood enormous material effort. Trees felled, stone quarried, lime burned, water carried, fields tended, roads maintained, food prepared. The sacred city was built from the labor of landscapes and people alike. To study Maya agriculture is to humble the eye. The tourist may first see pyramids. The archaeologist may first see settlement patterns. The poet may first see the moon above broken stone. But the civilization itself was rooted in gardens, fields, kitchens, storage rooms, and the aching backs of farmers. It was rooted in women grinding maize before sunrise, in men clearing plots beneath wet heat, in children learning when plants should be touched and when they should be left alone, in elders remembering which year the rains betrayed them. The sound of grinding stones may have been one of the great rhythms of Maya life. Long before priests spoke in plazas, long before scribes painted noble histories, households woke to the preparation of food. Kernels soaked, softened, ground, shaped, cooked. The smell of warm maize spread through houses. Food passed from hand to hand. In such moments, civilization renewed itself quietly. No monument records every meal. Yet without those meals, there would be no monuments. The fragile abundance of the Maya world was not failure. It was achievement under pressure. These people built cities in environments that demanded adaptation, patience, and risk. They made calendars that helped order agricultural time. They designed reservoirs to hold seasonal rain. They honored deities of water and maize because those forces were immediate and real. They understood that survival depended on cooperation between sky, soil, seed, and human labor. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. Many fields have left faint traces. Many household gardens vanished beneath later growth. Organic materials decayed in the heat and humidity. The voices of farmers were rarely carved in stone. Royal inscriptions name lords and wars far more readily than hunger, fatigue, planting, and repair. Yet the earth remembers in its own way. Terraces remain. Ancient pollen lingers. Soil chemistry speaks softly. Reservoir sediments keep the memory of wet years and dry years. The Maya story cannot be told only from palace steps. It must also be told from the edge of a field at sunrise, where a person presses seed into soil and hopes that the world will answer. It must be told from the side of a reservoir at the end of a dry season, where water has fallen too low and the mud smells of fear. It must be told from a kitchen where maize is ground in darkness, from a forest path where fruit trees mark old care, from a cave where offerings ask rain to return. Corn, rain, and fragile abundance formed the living triangle of Maya survival. When all three held together, cities rose, ceremonies flourished, and kings carved time into stone. When the balance weakened, anxiety passed through every layer of society. The gods might still be invoked. The calendars might still be counted. The monuments might still proclaim order, but fields know truths that courts cannot command. In the end, the maize plant stands as one of the great symbols of the ancient Maya world, tender yet powerful, dependent yet sustaining, ordinary yet sacred. It rose each season from the soil like a promise. Its leaves whispered in the wet wind. Its roots gripped earth above hidden stone. Its harvest filled bowls, bodies, and rituals. And when rains failed, when reservoirs emptied, when the horizon remained cruelly bright, the silence of the fields may have sounded louder than any broken monument. In the ancient Maya world, power glittered. It shone in jade beads cool against the skin. It flashed in polished obsidian, black as midnight and sharp enough to open flesh. It rustled in feathers of impossible brightness, lifted high above the head of a king. It sounded in shell trumpets, drums, rattles, and the heavy murmur of a crowd gathered in a plaza of white stone. Power had color, scent, weight, and blood. At the center of this world stood the divine king. He was not merely a ruler in the modern sense. He was not only a commander, judge, builder, or collector of tribute. He was a sacred being whose body carried the burden of connection. Through him, The city presented itself to gods and ancestors. Through him, dynasties claimed legitimacy. Through him, victory, rainfall, fertility, and cosmic order were made visible to the people who watched from below. To stand before such a king in full ceremonial dress must have been overwhelming. His body was transformed by regalia. Jade hung from his ears, chest, wrists, and belt. Shells clicked softly as he moved. His headdress rose high above him, bursting with feathers, masks, sacred signs, and perhaps the image of a divine ancestor or powerful being. His face might be painted. His garments might be woven with signs of lineage and status. In the heat of the plaza, as incense smoke drifted upward and sunlight struck the polished surfaces of ornaments, he did not appear as ordinary flesh. He appeared as office, ancestry, and divine theater combined. This was deliberate. Maya kingship depended on performance. A ruler had to be seen. He had to appear at the correct moment, in the correct place, under the correct signs of time. His body became part of the machinery of belief. When he danced, bled, scattered incense, received tribute, displayed captives, or dedicated a monument, he enacted a relationship between human society and the supernatural order. The plaza was his stage. It was also the city's heart. In that open space, surrounded by temples, palaces, platforms, and carved monuments, people gathered to witness the visible proof of authority. Nobles occupied privileged positions. Priests attended the ritual sequence. Scribes preserved names and dates. Warriors stood with weapons and trophies. Commoners watched from a distance, feeling the heat of the stones underfoot, smelling copal smoke, hearing the drums echo between walls. The spectacle told them that the world still held together. Yet beneath the beauty of ceremony lay a harder reality. Kings needed power not only over symbols, but over labor, food, warriors, trade, and human bodies. Divine kingship was splendid, but it was also demanding. A ruler who claimed sacred authority had to prove that the gods favored him. He had to win battles, build monuments, secure alliances, and sustain the city's confidence. Failure could become theological as well as political. This is where blood entered the story. Blood was one of the most precious substances a human being could offer. It carried life, ancestry, pain, and intention. In Maya royal ritual, bloodletting was a sacred act. Nobles pierced parts of their own bodies, drawing blood onto paper or other materials that could be burned. Rising smoke carried the offering upward and outward, into the realm of unseen listeners. Pain became communication. The body became an altar. The act was intimate, yet public meaning surrounded it. A queen kneeling in ritual pain was not simply suffering, she was participating in dynastic power. A king drawing blood was not merely harming himself. He was feeding a relationship that gave legitimacy to his rule. These rituals may have been performed during important calendrical moments, accessions, births, dedications, and other events where the boundary between present and sacred history had to be opened. The imagery of bloodletting can be intense, but it reveals something vital. Maya elites did not imagine authority as effortless. Sacred office required payment. The gods, ancestors, and forces of the world were not approached casually. They were given something costly. The ruler's body, ornamented and exalted, also had to be wounded. Majesty and vulnerability met in a single act. War added another layer to this sacred order. Maya warfare was not simply a struggle for territory. Although land, roots, resources, and tribute mattered, it was also a struggle for prestige, captives, legitimacy, and divine favor. Capturing high-status enemies could be more important than killing them outright on the battlefield. A bound captive displayed beneath a victorious ruler became a living sign that one dynasty had triumphed over another. His humiliation strengthened the conqueror's claim to power. Carved monuments often show captives in positions of defeat. Their bodies are bent, stripped, or marked. Their names may be recorded. Their suffering is not hidden, because it serves the message of the monument. The victorious king stands above them, larger, composed, and radiant with authority. The image is brutal, but also precise. It tells observers that sacred order has been enforced through violence. The holy city was therefore not peaceful in any simple sense. Behind the temple, music and the astronomical calculations lay competition, raiding, siege, alliance, betrayal, and revenge. Dynasties rose by marriage and war. Cities competed for influence over smaller centers. Royal courts sent and received emissaries, goods, brides, captives, and threats. The Maya political world was a mosaic of kingdoms, each trying to survive beneath the same sacred sky. Jade moved through this world as a substance of power. Its green surface evoked maize, water, breath, and renewal. It was difficult to obtain and laborious to shape. To wear jade was to display access to distant resources, skilled artisans, and elite networks. In burials, jade could accompany the dead into the unseen realm. A bead placed in the mouth of a ruler might symbolize breath or life essence continuing beyond death. Jade was not merely wealth. It was transformed earth, made sacred by color, rarity, and association. Obsidian told another story. Unlike jade, it was volcanic glass, born from fire and stone, capable of being fractured into blades of extraordinary sharpness. Lithic analysis allows archaeologists to trace obsidian artifacts back to geological sources, revealing trade routes and political connections. A small blade found in a city may carry the memory of distant mountains. It may speak of exchange, tribute, alliances, or control over valued materials. In warfare and ritual, obsidian was both practical and symbolic, a dark edge between life and death. Ceramic vessels reveal the courtly world in another form. Painted pots placed in tombs or used in elite feasting show scenes of nobles, gods, scribes, musicians, attendants, and supernatural beings. Some bear hieroglyphic texts naming owners or contents. A drinking vessel could become a declaration of identity. A feast could become politics made edible. Cacao, served as a prestigious drink, may have circulated among elites in moments of alliance, negotiation, celebration, and display. To share such goods was to participate in hierarchy. The court itself was a theater of controlled closeness. A king did not rule alone. Around him stood queens, princes, scribes, priests, warriors, artists, administrators, and servants. Each had a role in sustaining the visible order of kingship. Scribes made memory durable. Artists shaped the ruler's image. Priests managed ritual knowledge. Warriors brought captives. Nobles lent support or threatened rebellion. Royal women could carry diplomatic significance through marriage, lineage, and ceremony. The palace was not simply a residence. It was a machine of power. Within its rooms, decisions were made, tribute counted, visitors received, rituals prepared, and status performed. Courtyards framed movement, benches, doorways, painted walls, and restricted spaces shaped who could approach whom. Architecture trained the body to understand hierarchy. Some people entered freely. Others waited. Some spoke. Others bowed. The built environment taught authority without needing to explain it. Yet divine kingship carried a dangerous promise. If a ruler claimed to uphold cosmic order, what happened when the order failed? If he stood between city and gods? What happened when rain did not come? If he claimed victory through sacred favor? What happened when enemies burned his palace or captured his nobles? The same ideology that exalted kings could expose them. Power that rises into heaven casts a long shadow when it falls. This is one reason Maya monuments feel so poignant. They were carved to proclaim certainty. They show rulers as magnificent, victorious, divinely sanctioned, and fixed within sacred time. But many stand now in ruined plazas, their messages eroded by rain, their courts gone, their dynasties ended. The king who seemed eternal became stone. The stone itself became fragment. Still, the ambition remains visible. It is difficult not to feel awe at people who believed memory could be made so forcefully present. Royal tombs reveal the final transformation of power. A dead ruler might be laid beneath a temple, wrapped in textiles, surrounded by jade, ceramics, shells, stingray spines, pigments, ornaments, and offerings. His body entered the architecture of the city. His tomb could become a sacred foundation. Future generations built above him, returned to him, invoked him, and used his presence to strengthen dynastic continuity. Death did not remove the king from politics. It changed the form of his participation. The tomb was both grave and engine. Through burial, the ruler became an ancestor. Through architecture, the ancestor became part of the city. Through ritual, the city continued to draw authority from the dead. The living climbed temples built over royal remains, perhaps never forgetting that beneath their feet lay a body transformed into sacred memory. This deep relationship between blood, jade, and kingship shows how Maya society fused beauty with danger. The objects are dazzling, the rituals are solemn, the architecture is magnificent, yet the system depended on inequality, sacrifice, warfare, and the pressure placed upon human bodies. The same hand that carved a graceful glyph might record the capture of a rival. The same plaza that hosted sacred dance might display prisoners awaiting death. The same king who bled for his city might demand blood from others. Still, to see only cruelty would be too simple. The Maya courtly world was also a place of art, calculation, diplomacy, poetry, craftsmanship, and profound religious imagination. Its rulers were not cardboard tyrants. They were human beings, raised inside expectations larger than themselves. Some may have believed deeply in their sacred duties. Some may have feared failure. Some may have loved the city they ruled. Some may have ordered violence with calm conviction. Like all ancient elites, they lived within structures of power that magnified both grandeur and brutality. For the common people watching from the plaza, the king's performance may have stirred many emotions at once: awe, fear, pride, resentment, hope, loyalty, suspicion. A successful ruler could embody the city's strength. A failing ruler could become a wound at its center. In times of abundance, ceremony may have confirmed confidence. In times of hunger, The same ceremony may have seemed hollow. The divine king stood where contradictions met. He was mortal, yet dressed as more than mortal. He shed blood, yet commanded others to bleed. He honored ancestors, yet fought living rivals. He claimed to anchor time, yet time consumed him. Around him gathered the richest materials of the Maya world: jade from distant sources, obsidian from volcanic lands, feathers from brilliant birds, shells from far waters, pigments from earth and mineral, cacao from careful cultivation. The world was assembled on his body, and then he died. Another ruler took his place. Another monument rose. Another ceremony filled the plaza with smoke. Another captive knelt. Another date entered stone. The sacred drama continued, generation after generation, until in many cities the rhythm faltered. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. The names of famous kings survive, but countless attendants are gone. The hands that polished jade are gone. The warriors who dragged captives through plazas are gone. The women who prepared ritual garments are gone. The scribes who painted final details by lamplight are gone. The prisoners whose faces appeared beneath victorious feet are often known only through defeat. Archaeology recovers traces, but not the full trembling life of the moment. Yet enough remains to understand the force of Maya power. It was not quiet administration. It was cosmic theater. It wrapped politics in the colors of the sacred. It made rulership visible through blood, jade, feather, smoke, stone, and time. It asked people to believe that one human body could stand at the crossroads of heaven, earth, and the ancestral depths. In the plazas of the ancient cities, beneath the pitiless sun and the watching stars, divine kingship burned brightly. It gave form to ambition. It gathered labor into temples. It turned victory into sculpture and pain into prayer. It made kings seem eternal, but eternity is a dangerous costume for mortal flesh. The Maya wrote in stone, plaster, bone, shell, jade, ceramic, and folded books of bark paper. They wrote on stairways and lintels, on temple walls and painted vessels, on monuments raised in plazas where sunlight and rain would fall across the names of kings. Their script was beautiful, dense, and alive with image. To the untrained eye, it can look like a procession of faces, knots, teeth, eyes, hands, animal heads, and sacred signs, each block compressed with meaning like a seed holding a forest. For generations, these glyphs stood before the world like sealed doors. Explorers copied them. Artists drew them. Scholars argued over them. Some believed they were mostly symbols of astronomy and religion. Some doubted that they could record real speech. Others saw that the repeated patterns must mean something more exact. Dates could be recognized sooner than sentences, but dates alone are not enough to restore a civilization's voice. The great question remained: did the Maya write history? The answer, slowly and brilliantly recovered, was yes. Their script joined signs for sounds with signs for words. It could name people, places, gods, titles, actions, and relationships. It could record birth, accession, capture, bloodletting, dedication, death, burial, war, alliance, descent, and memory. The carved faces on monuments were not nameless idols. The figures in royal dress were not generic priests. They were individuals, placed within dynasties, rivalries, ambitions, and sacred obligations. The written world of the Maya changed the ruins forever. A temple was no longer only a structure. It could be a statement. A stairway was no longer only a way to climb. It could be a book made of stone. A pot was no longer only a vessel. It could identify its owner, its purpose, and the social world in which it moved. An altar was no longer only a carved object. It could preserve the memory of a ritual that once gathered smoke, music, blood, and witnesses into a single charged moment. Consider the experience of standing before a carved monument in a Maya plaza. The stone is worn. Rain has softened its edges. Lichens cling to small hollows. A ruler appears in profile, dressed in regalia that nearly overwhelms the human body beneath it. Around him, glyph blocks descend in ordered sequence. To one viewer, the scene is silent grandeur. To a trained epigrapher, it begins to stir. A date emerges, a name appears, a title follows. An event takes shape. Suddenly, the monument is not mute. It is speaking across more than 1,000 years. This recovery was one of the great intellectual adventures of modern archaeology. It required patience, comparison, and humility. Scholars studied repeated signs across sites. They matched glyphs to known calendar positions. They compared inscriptions with later Maya languages and surviving traditions. They identified emblem glyphs associated with particular royal centers. They recognized phonetic elements, syllables, and patterns of spelling. Every deciphered sign opened new doors, while also revealing how much remained uncertain. The process was not merely technical, it was human. A name restored from stone is a kind of resurrection. A ruler once reduced to a sculpted form becomes a person with parents, enemies, children, victories, humiliations, and death. A queen appears not as decoration, but as a political actor. A captured lord becomes more than a body beneath another king's feet. He becomes a named participant in a violent story. The Maya past grows crowded again. Yet writing did not belong evenly to everyone. The surviving inscriptions are heavily weighted toward elites. Kings commissioned monuments. Courts controlled scribal production. Dynasties shaped memory to serve power. A royal text could emphasize victory and legitimacy while hiding defeat, hunger, doubt, or rebellion. Stone speaks, but it does not always confess. It proclaims, it arranges, it performs authority. The Maya scribes were masters of that performance. They were not simple record keepers. They were artists, scholars, calligraphers, theologians, historians, and servants of power. Their work required training in signs, sounds, grammar, calendar systems, mythology, courtly etiquette, and visual design. A glyph block had to be legible and beautiful. A text had to fit a surface. The flow of reading had to cooperate with the visual program around it. Scribes gave language a body. In painted books, their skill reached another level. The surviving codices are only fragments of what must once have been a much larger tradition. Made from bark paper and folded like screens, these books contain tables, deities, rituals, numbers, and divinatory structures. Their pages show a world where calculation and sacred imagery were inseparable. The loss of most Maya books is one of the great wounds in the history of human knowledge. Fire, damp, violence, neglect, and time carried away libraries whose contents we can now only imagine. What vanished with those books? Perhaps lists of rulers from small towns now unknown. Perhaps medical recipes, songs, local myths, trade records, tribute accounts, eclipse tables, marriage alliances, ritual instructions, maps, prayers, and stories told in voices far different from royal monuments. Perhaps there were books kept by lineages, books used by specialists, books consulted before journeys, books opened in fear during drought. So much is gone that the silence itself becomes part of the evidence. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. A glyph may be readable, but its emotional world remains distant. A phrase may tell us that a ruler performed a ceremony, but not whether the crowd trembled, rejoiced, doubted, or merely endured the heat. A text may name a war, but not the smell of burned thatch, the cries of captives, or the grief in households after defeat. Writing gives us history, but not all of life. Ceramic vessels bring us closer to the social texture of the court. On some painted scenes show nobles seated in conversation, attendants presenting offerings, scribes holding brushes, musicians performing, or supernatural beings moving in strange narrative worlds. The glyphic texts around them may name the vessel as a drinking cup or identify the owner. Such objects belong to feasting, gifting, burial, and display. They circulated within relationships. A cup could travel farther than a person, carrying a name from one court to another. The stairways of certain Maya sites offer a different kind of written ambition. Hieroglyphic steps transformed movement into reading. To climb was to pass across history. A ruler could build his dynasty into architecture, setting ancestry beneath the feet of those who approached sacred space. The body moved upward, while the text carried memory backward. Such design reveals how deeply the Maya fused physical experience with written meaning. Writing also shaped warfare. Victors recorded captures. They named defeated lords. They fixed violent events within sacred calendars. They used inscription to make conquest durable. A battle forgotten is only suffering lost to time. A battle carved into stone becomes political memory. The written word allowed power to outlive the battlefield. But writing could also preserve vulnerability. Death dates appear. Periods of instability appear. Broken monuments may hint at deliberate destruction. Defaced inscriptions suggest not simple decay, but acts of memory warfare, attempts to damage a ruler's presence in the world. To attack a monument was to attack the person and dynasty it represented. In a civilization where memory was sacred, erasure was a weapon. The glyphs therefore reveal not only what the Maya valued, but what they feared. They feared being forgotten. They feared broken succession. They feared defeat made permanent by an enemy's text. They feared disorder in time. Writing answered these fears by binding events to stone, day signs, titles, ancestors, and gods. It gave fragile human moments an architecture of permanence. The beauty of Maya writing lies partly in its refusal to separate image from language. A sign can be read, but it can also be seen as art. It may carry sound, meaning, and visual force at once. The script does not reduce the world into plain marks. It keeps the world animate. Faces look outward from words. Animals lend bodies to syllables. Divine signs breathe inside grammar. Reading becomes an encounter with a living surface. In this, the Maya written world feels unlike modern pages of black letters on white paper. It is more crowded, more ceremonial, more sculptural. A text may be a monument, a royal body, a sacred object, a political weapon, and a calendar event all at once. Words do not merely describe reality, they take their place inside it. The decipherment of the script has given the ancient Maya back some of their historical depth, but not all of it. The work continues. New discoveries appear from excavations, museum collections, LIDAR surveys, and careful reanalysis of old drawings. A single glyphic passage can change the understanding of a dynasty. A newly found panel can reveal an alliance, a parentage, or a war previously unknown. Only time will tell what future discoveries will be made. The written world of glyphs leaves us answerless, adrift to ponder the strange endurance of human speech. A king ordered his name carved because he wanted it to last. A scribe shaped the signs because he knew the power of memory. A city raised monuments because it believed the past should stand in public. Centuries passed. Forest covered the plazas. Rain wore the faces down. Languages changed. Empires came and went. Yet the signs remained, patient and unread, waiting for eyes that could hear them again. And when they began to speak, they did not tell of a vanished people without thought or history. They told of dynasties, mothers, fathers, rivals, ceremonies, betrayals, deaths, gods, and days counted with care. They told of a civilization that wrote itself into the skin of stone, hoping that time, however vast and hungry, might not devour everything. The Maya built greatness without the tools that many people assume civilization requires. They raised temples without iron chisels. They carried stone without wheeled carts. They moved goods without horses, oxen, camels, or donkeys. They cut, shaped, lifted, burned, painted, carved, measured, and organized with materials that to a modern imagination may seem insufficient for the scale of their achievement. Yet the cities stand. Their stairways climb. Their walls endure. Their reservoirs remain in earth. Their causeways still run beneath forest roots. This is one of the quiet astonishments of the Maya world. In other ancient landscapes, the story of labor often includes draft animals pulling plows, wagons, sledges, and heavy loads. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and the Mediterranean, wheeled transport or large domesticated animals helped shape certain forms of movement and production. The Maya lowlands followed another path. The absence of these familiar technologies did not prevent complexity. It demanded different solutions. Human labor became the engine, not only brute strength, but coordination, skill, timing, obligation, and memory. A city was built because thousands of tasks were aligned across seasons and generations. Stone had to be quarried. Limestone had to be burned into lime for plaster. Timber had to be cut. Water had to be managed. Food had to be produced for workers. Specialists had to design, measure, carve, paint, and supervise. Laborers had to carry baskets, stones, earth, water, and fuel beneath a sun that could drain the body of strength. To imagine Maya construction properly, one must first hear it. The rasp of stone tools against limestone, the thud of loads set down on packed earth, the crackle of fires burning for lime production, the calls of workers moving in lines, the soft scrape of plaster being smoothed across a wall, the rhythm of feet on causeways, the breath of men and women carrying what no animal would carry for them. The city rose to the sound of human effort. Limestone was the great building material of many Maya regions. It could be cut, shaped, and stacked. It could also be transformed through fire, burned and processed. It produced lime plaster, one of the defining materials of Maya architecture. Plaster made surfaces bright, smooth, clean, and ceremonial. It covered floors, walls, plazas, temples, and reservoirs. It turned rough stone into shining space. In sunlight, a newly plastered plaza must have been almost blinding, a radiant stage for ritual and rule. But plaster was costly. It required fuel. Fuel required wood. Wood required access to surrounding forests. Each smooth white surface carried hidden labor and environmental demand. A city that gleamed like a sacred vision also consumed energy from the living landscape. The polished splendor of public architecture was never free. It was paid for in trees, heat, sweat, and time. Maya builders were masters of mass and meaning. Their pyramids were not built as empty piles of stone. They were carefully arranged sacred mountains, often constructed over earlier buildings. A temple might be enlarged, encased, remodeled, and transformed through successive generations. The past was not simply demolished. It was entombed inside the present. Older shrines remained within newer structures, hidden but potent, like ancestors inside the body of the city. This layered construction is one of the most revealing discoveries of stratigraphic excavation. When archaeologists tunnel carefully into pyramids, they often find earlier phases inside them. A final structure may be only the outer skin of a long architectural biography. Painted masks, stairways, offerings, floors, and walls may lie sealed in darkness, preserved because later builders covered them. Each phase marks a moment when rulers and communities chose to renew sacred space, often to proclaim continuity, legitimacy, and ambition. A pyramid therefore contains time. It is not just tall, it is deep. Its height rises upward, but its history moves inward. The person climbing the outside may not see the older sanctuaries buried within, yet the builders knew, the city knew, the gods were presumed to know. Architecture became memory made heavy. The absence of metal tools did not mean the absence of precision. Maya craftspeople used stone tools, especially chert and obsidian, along with wood, bone, shell, and abrasive materials. Lithic analysis shows how carefully these tools were produced, used, resharpened, and exchanged. Obsidian blades, sometimes sharper than modern steel at their edges, served many cutting functions, though they were brittle. Chert tools worked stone, wood, and other materials. Skill mattered as much as material. A tool in the hand of an expert is more than its substance. Carvers coaxed extraordinary detail from limestone, glyphs, faces, ornaments, divine beings, woven patterns, feathers, cords, and dates emerged from stone through disciplined technique. The result can appear impossibly intricate. Monumental sculpture required not only strength, but planning. The artist had to understand layout, proportion, symbolic program, and the surface itself. Mistakes could not be erased easily. The stone demanded confidence. In cities such as Palenque, Copan, Tikal, Calakmul, and many others, architecture organized movement and emotion. Stairways forced bodies to climb. Doorways narrowed access. Courtyards gathered people into controlled spaces. Elevated platforms separated nobles from commoners. Temple summits placed rulers and priests above the crowd, close to sky and gods. Long causeways connected groups of buildings, guiding processions across the city. Every path taught hierarchy. Every step reminded the body where it stood. The Maya built not only upward, But outward, settlements extended beyond monumental centers into neighborhoods, terraces, fields, workshops, shrines, roads, and household compounds. The impressive pyramid was only the most visible part of a larger urban organism. LIDAR surveys have shown that many landscapes were far more densely modified than earlier observers guessed. Beneath forest cover lie platforms, embankments, agricultural systems, and causeways, traces of a world organized on a scale once hidden from ground-level sight. Causeways deserve special attention. Raised roads, sometimes coated in plaster, connected architectural groups, and sometimes linked distant centers. They created lines of movement across wet or uneven ground. In moonlight, a white causeway may have glowed faintly through the dark, like a path made of bone. During ceremonies, processions could move along these routes with banners, music, incense, and royal bodies on display. Practical infrastructure became ritual theater. Water architecture was equally vital. Reservoirs, channels, dams, and catchment surfaces allowed cities to survive dry seasons. Engineering was not always spectacular in the way a pyramid is spectacular, but it was perhaps more essential. A temple may impress the eye, yet a reservoir preserves life. The Maya understood this. They shaped cities to catch rain, guide runoff, and store water. In some places, systems were large, deliberate, and politically significant. Control of water could strengthen authority. The lack of wheeled transport did not mean the Maya were ignorant of the wheel as a concept. Small wheeled objects are known from Mesoamerica. The issue was not imagination, but usefulness. In dense forests, rugged terrain, seasonal mud, and without strong draft animals, wheels offered limited practical advantage for heavy transport. Technologies do not exist in isolation. They depend on environment, animals, roads, labor systems, and social need. The Maya world reminds us that civilization is not a checklist. No iron, yet sculpture. No draft animals, yet cities. No wheeled carts, yet trade. No old-world plow, yet agricultural sophistication. No single empire, yet political complexity. No alphabet, yet a full writing system. No telescope, yet astronomy. Their achievements cannot be measured by what they lacked, but by what they made possible with what they had. Trade carried materials across long distances, jade from distant sources, obsidian from volcanic highlands, marine shells from coasts, salt, cacao, cotton, feathers, ceramics, and other goods moved through networks of exchange. Some traveled by foot, some likely moved by canoe along rivers and coasts. Porters carried loads with tumplanes across paths that linked ecological zones. Each object arriving in a royal court carried geography inside it. A shell brought the sea inland. Obsidian brought volcanoes into the lowlands. Jade brought distant green stone into the mouth of a dead king. Behind every elite object stood many unseen journeys. A trader setting out before dawn, a canoe slipping through dark water, a porter tightening a load against his forehead, a marketplace filling with voices, a noble inspecting tribute, a craftsperson selecting raw material, a scribe recording ownership. The Maya economy moved through bodies, paths, waterways, memory, and trust. Cities were therefore achievements of organization as much as engineering. Someone had to decide where a plaza would lie. Someone had to command or persuade labor. Someone had to feed workers. Someone had to maintain roads, repair plaster, clear drains, and renew surfaces after rain and wear. Architecture is not completed when construction ends. It must be cared for. The gleaming city required constant attention, like a sacred body washed and dressed again and again. The common people carried much of this burden. Households supplied labor, food, goods, and service. They built their own dwellings, tended fields, maintained local shrines, and participated in larger civic demands. Their houses were usually less durable than palaces and temples, made of materials that decay more easily in the humid tropics. Because of this, their presence can seem faint beside stone monuments. Yet without them, the city is impossible. A pyramid may carry the name of a king, but the hands of many raised it. Some hands quarried, some carried, some mixed plaster, some cut wood, some cooked food for laborers, some shaped tools, some repaired paths, some swept plazas, some painted walls, some planted the maize that fed the builders. The monument is royal in inscription, but collective in reality. This is the human truth beneath architectural wonder. The Maya city was not magic. It was not built by vanished strangers, nor by impossible forces, nor by mystery alone. It was built by people whose intelligence, discipline, and endurance deserve to be seen clearly. Their methods were different from those of other ancient societies, but difference is not inferiority, it is adaptation. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. We do not know every labor arrangement. We cannot hear every shouted instruction. We cannot recover every exhausted worker's complaint, every skilled mason's pride, every artisan's private fear of failure. The city speaks through stone, but labor often leaves only traces. A tool mark, a quarry scar, a worn floor, a buried offering, a collapsed wall repaired in haste. Yet the evidence is enough to overturn a lazy assumption. The Maya did not need wheels, iron, or beasts of burden to enter history. They carved their own road. They built with limestone, wood, fire, water, obsidian, chert, mathematics, ritual, and human will. They raised cities that caught the sun and watched the stars. They turned plazas into theaters, reservoirs into lifelines, and pyramids into mountains of memory. In the deep forest, where roots now cross the stones and birds nest above abandoned stairways, the old buildings continue to ask a question. What does a civilization truly require? The Maya answer quietly. Through every carved block and buried floor, it requires not the same tools everywhere, but the capacity to organize meaning and labor. It requires people who can look at stone and see a temple, at rain and see a system, at a path and see a procession, at a city and see the shape of the cosmos. Without wheels or metal, they built a world, and the world still stands, beyond the pyramids, beyond the carved names of kings, beyond the temple summits where incense rose into the blue heat of morning. There lived the great majority of the Maya world. They were farmers, potters, weavers, hunters, builders, traders, cooks, healers, porters, midwives, children, elders, servants, and skilled hands of every kind. They are harder to see than rulers, because they did not usually command monuments. Their names were rarely carved in public stone. Their faces were seldom preserved with royal grandeur, yet without them, the cities would have been empty shells. The Maya world was made in households. A household was not only a place to sleep, it was a workshop, shrine, kitchen, storehouse, school, and memory chamber. Its packed floors held the marks of daily motion. Its hearth gave warmth, food, smoke, and center. Its walls sheltered tools, mats, baskets, grinding stones, jars, sleeping places, and sacred objects. Around it, people repaired roofs, swept courtyards, tended gardens, shaped clay, prepared meals, taught children, and remembered the dead. Archaeology has learned to look closely at such spaces. A broken pot near a hearth can speak of cooking. A concentration of stone flakes can suggest tool-making. Burned seeds can reveal diet. Soil chemistry can show where food was prepared. Animals were kept, or refuse was discarded. Burials beneath floors can reveal kinship, status, age, disease, and devotion. Household archaeology gives the past a human temperature. It restores the smell of smoke, the scrape of grinding stones, the clutter of work, and the closeness of family life. At dawn, the first labor of the day may have begun in darkness. A woman kneels at a grinding stone, moving maize back and forth beneath her hands. The sound is steady, patient, and ancient. Children stir nearby. A fire catches. Smoke rises through thatch and enters the morning air. Outside, a man checks tools before walking toward fields. An older child carries water. Someone feeds a dog. Someone watches the sky. The city's temples may still be shadowed, but life has already begun in the houses. These ordinary rhythms sustained everything. The noble court depended on food, cloth, ceramics, salt, fuel, water, and service. The priest depended on offerings prepared by others. The warrior depended on households that raised him, fed him, clothed him, and mourned him. The scribe depended on pigments, brushes, surfaces, and the long support of a society that valued his training. Civilization was not located only at the top of temples. It lay in the repeated acts that allowed another day to continue. Children were everywhere in this world, though they appear only faintly in the evidence. They learned by watching. They learned how to grind maize, shape clay, carry water, recognize plants, tend animals, listen to stories, respect elders, and understand the dangers of forest, fire, strangers, and drought. They played in courtyards, followed older siblings, and absorbed the sacred geography of their home. A temple was not an abstract monument to them. It was part of the horizon of childhood, rising over their lives as naturally as trees and clouds. Some children were born into noble houses, wrapped from infancy in dynastic expectation. Others were born into farming families, where survival depended on work shared by many hands. Some grew healthy and strong. Others suffered illness, malnutrition, injury, or early death. Burial evidence reminds us that the ancient world was filled with parental grief. Small bodies placed carefully in the earth speak more quietly than royal tombs, but with equal force, the dead remained close. In many Maya households, burials were placed beneath floors or near domestic spaces. This brought ancestors into the architecture of daily life. A family might cook, sleep, speak, and raise children above the remains of those who had come first. Death did not always mean departure into distance. It could mean becoming part of the house itself, part of its strength, memory, and protection. Genomic data has added another dimension to this story. The study of ancient DNA, when preservation allows it, can reveal biological relationships, population continuity, migration, and ancestry. In the humid tropics, preservation is difficult, and many remains do not yield clear genetic information. Yet where evidence survives, It helps show that the Maya were not a vanished race, but part of deep regional histories with living descendants. The ruins may seem deserted, but the people did not dissolve into nothing. Communities endured, changed, suffered, adapted, and continued. This matters profoundly. To speak of disappearance too carelessly is to erase the living Maya. Millions of Maya descendants still exist, speaking many languages, maintaining traditions, working fields, making art, telling stories, resisting oppression, and inhabiting a world shaped by both ancient inheritance and modern history. The abandoned cities are real, but they are not the whole story. The silence of stone must not be mistaken for the silence of a people. Inside the ancient cities, social differences were visible. Noble residences were larger, more elaborate, and closer to ceremonial centers. Commoner houses were often simpler, though not without beauty, skill, and ritual meaning. Some households had access to imported goods, fine ceramics, jade ornaments, obsidian blades, or special craft tools. Others lived with fewer possessions. Inequality existed, but it was not always a simple ladder. Communities contained varied roles: local leaders, craft specialists, ritual experts, farmers with different resources, and families tied into networks of obligation. Artisans were essential to this complexity. A potter knew clay in its moods: too wet, too dry, too gritty, too soft. Each condition mattered. Vessels had to be shaped, smoothed, slipped, painted, fired, used, traded, broken, repaired, discarded, or buried with the dead. Some ceramics were humble cooking pots, blackened by fire and touched daily. Others were painted vessels for courts, gifts, feasts, and tombs. Both kinds mattered. One fed the living, the other carried prestige and memory. Weavers worked with fibers that rarely survive in the archaeological record, yet their labor clothed the world. Textiles must have been everywhere, in garments, wrappings, bags, banners, cords, mats, and offerings. Much has vanished because cloth decays, but images show elaborate dress, and tools hint at production. The absence of surviving fabric should not blind us to its importance. Ancient cities were not bare stone landscapes. They were full of color, movement, texture, and woven skill. Merchants and traders moved through the Maya world carrying both goods and information. They knew routes, dangers, alliances, markets, and languages. They transported salt, cacao, obsidian, jade, feathers, shells, pottery, cotton, and other valued materials. Along with objects came stories, rumors, marriage possibilities, political news, ritual knowledge, and warnings. Trade was circulation, not only of wealth, but of awareness. A distant war might first arrive as a whisper with a traveling merchant. Porters bore loads across difficult terrain. Their work was hard, repetitive, and vital. A luxury object in a palace may have passed through many hands before it reached elite display. A shell from the coast, a blade from highland obsidian, a bundle of cacao, a load of salt, each carried the strain of travel. The grandeur of courts depended on feet moving over paths, shoulders bearing weight, and bodies enduring heat. Food preparation created its own world of expertise. Maize had to be processed carefully. Beans, squash, chili peppers, fruits, wild plants, game, fish, cacao, and other foods formed varied diets depending on region and status. Cooking was knowledge stored in hands. The preparation of a meal involved timing, tools, fuel, taste, memory, and social care. A feast in a noble court and a meal in a common house differed in scale, but both belonged to the same human need to transform raw earth into shared life. Disease and injury also shaped the lives behind the pyramids. Bones can reveal arthritis from labor, healed fractures, dental wear, nutritional stress, infection, and other burdens. Teeth worn by grit from stone-ground maize remind us that even daily bread could mark the body. Spines and joints record work. Childhood stress leaves signs in growth. Archaeology can sometimes read hardship written not in glyphs, but in bone. Yet these people were not only sufferers, they laughed, desired, argued, taught, repaired, decorated, celebrated, mourned, and dreamed. They told stories at night. They watched storms gather. They admired fine objects. They feared illness. They marked births. They scolded children. They remembered ancestors. They lived full lives beneath social systems that can seem distant but were made from recognizable human concerns. The people behind the pyramids force us to widen the lens. A civilization is not only its calendar, script, kings, wars, and temples. It is also the person sweeping a courtyard before sunrise, the child carrying a small pot of water, the potter watching smoke from a kiln, the farmer feeling the first drop of rain on his arm, the mother listening to a fevered child breathe, the old man naming ancestors whose graves lie beneath the floor, the trader returning with news from a distant city, the worker pausing in exhaustion beside a half-built wall. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. The names of ordinary people have mostly vanished. Their jokes are gone. Their songs are gone. Their private fears and small triumphs are gone. The exact sound of their voices cannot be recovered, but their presence remains in the worn surfaces of tools, in house platforms beneath soil, in burials arranged with care, in food remains, in paths, in fields, in the very stones of the cities. When we stand before a Maya pyramid, it is tempting to look upward. But perhaps we should also look around, at the ground where thousands gathered, at the paths where workers walked, at the spaces where houses once stood, at the places where smoke rose each morning, at the invisible neighborhoods that gave the monument life. The pyramids are magnificent because they reach toward the heavens. The people are more magnificent still because they made that reaching possible. There are landscapes that remember thirst, not in words, not in monuments, not in the proud speech of kings. They remember it in cracked clay, in lake mud, in mineral layers slowly formed inside caves, in pollen trapped within ancient sediments, in the silence of abandoned reservoirs where water once flashed beneath the sun. The Maya world left behind temples, glyphs, tombs, and causeways, but it also left behind evidence of hunger in the earth itself. Drought does not always arrive like disaster. Sometimes it comes softly, one delayed rain at a time. A planting season begins with uncertainty. Clouds gather, then pass without breaking. A field is prepared, but the seedlings remain weak. A reservoir fills less than it should. A spring runs lower than the elders remember. People reassure one another because every society has survived bad years. Then another uncertain season follows, and another. The old confidence begins to thin. In the Maya lowlands, water was never a simple gift. Rain came seasonally, and people built their lives around its rhythm. Reservoirs, canals, plastered catchments, dams, and careful settlement choices helped communities endure dry months. The Maya were not careless in the face of environmental risk. They understood water as both sacred and practical. They planned for it, prayed for it, stored it, and built cities that could turn rainfall into life. Yet even the most intelligent system has limits. A reservoir depends on the sky. A field depends on timing. A king depends on people believing that order still holds. When drought becomes severe enough, it does not merely reduce water. It changes relationships. It tests obligations. It exposes inequality. It makes every demand from the palace feel heavier. It makes every tribute payment more painful. It makes every failed ceremony more dangerous to the reputation of those who claim sacred authority. The scientific evidence for climate stress comes from many quiet archives. In lake beds, layers of sediment settle year after year, preserving traces of changing environments. Minerals, shells, pollen, charcoal, and chemical signals can reveal shifts in rainfall, vegetation, erosion, and human land use. In caves, stalagmites grow slowly as mineral-rich water drips from above. Their layers can preserve clues about ancient rainfall patterns. These formations are like stone candles burning downward through time, each layer holding a faint memory of climate. Radiocarbon dating helps bind such evidence to historical sequence. It allows researchers to compare environmental change with archaeological phases, construction patterns, settlement shifts, and the last dated monuments from particular cities. No single sample explains the fate of a civilization, but when multiple lines of evidence begin to cluster, a pattern emerges. In several regions, severe drought appears to have coincided with periods of political stress, urban contraction, and the decline of royal monument building. The story, however, is not simple. Drought alone did not destroy the Maya. That explanation is too easy, and ancient history rarely rewards easy answers. The Maya had endured dry periods before. Some communities adapted. Some regions suffered more than others. Some cities weakened, while others survived or even gained strength for a time. The southern lowlands did not fall in one year, beneath one empty sky. The crisis unfolded unevenly, with local histories shaped by politics, warfare, trade, agriculture, and social pressure. Still, drought was a force that could turn strain into fracture. Imagine a city already burdened by rivalry. Its ruler must maintain ceremonies, reward nobles, repair buildings, feed workers, support specialists, and prepare for conflict. Farmers bring less maize than expected. Water carriers wait longer at shrinking reservoirs. Children grow thin. Nobles quarrel over stored food. Priests perform rituals with greater urgency. The king appears in public dressed in jade and feathers, but the people look not only at him, they look at the sky. If rain fails, faith can become fragile. This does not mean people suddenly stopped believing in their gods. Human belief is deeper and more complex than that. But confidence in particular rulers, rituals, and dynasties could weaken. A king who claimed to mediate between gods and people had to face the terrible question of visible failure. If he could not bring rain, if he could not win wars, if he could not protect fields and reservoirs, what did his sacred office mean? A dry season could become political. Competition over water may have intensified local tensions. Communities controlling better reservoirs or more reliable sources could gain advantage. Smaller settlements might abandon exposed locations and move toward safer zones. People might resist labor demands from royal centers. Tribute networks could falter. Warriors might raid stored food. Allies might turn away from weakened courts. Enemies might strike when scarcity made defense harder. In such moments, the environment is not background. It becomes part of the historical action. The sky enters politics. The soil enters religion. The reservoir enters warfare. A drought is not merely a shortage of rain. It is a test of every institution built upon the expectation that rain will return. The Maya response was not uniform. Some cities invested more heavily in water control. Some built or expanded reservoirs. Some shifted settlement patterns. Some maintained ceremonial life under pressure. Some elites may have doubled down on display, carving monuments and performing rituals to proclaim stability even as conditions worsened. Such acts can look brave, desperate, or both. A monument raised in a time of crisis may be not a sign of comfort, but a declaration against fear. In the countryside, families made decisions that rarely appear in royal texts. Should they plant the same fields again? Should they move closer to kin? Should they send a child to another household? Should they join a stronger center? Should they abandon a house where ancestors lay beneath the floor? These were not abstract demographic shifts. They were painful human choices. To leave a home was to leave memory. To remain might mean hunger. The silence of abandonment can hide many small tragedies. A house platform falls out of use. A hearth cools. A pot breaks and is not replaced. Weeds claim a courtyard. The path to the field narrows. An ancestor burial remains beneath the floor, unvisited. A family becomes part of a movement no monument records. Multiply that by thousands, and the political map changes. The great cities depended on the countryside more than royal inscriptions admit. If households left, fields were neglected. If farmers withheld support, palaces weakened. If trade became unsafe, elite goods became harder to obtain. If food surpluses declined, large labor projects became difficult. Monumental civilization rests on countless ordinary continuities. Drought breaks continuity. There is also the slow violence of malnutrition. Hunger does not always kill immediately. It weakens bodies, lowers resistance to disease, increases childhood mortality, reduces fertility, and deepens social fear. A society under nutritional stress may still hold ceremonies and fight wars, but beneath the visible events, the body count grows quietly. Bone can sometimes preserve signs of stress. Teeth can record childhood hardship. Burial patterns may hint at unequal suffering. The poor usually meet disaster first, and yet the Maya did not simply surrender. Their long history shows resilience, adaptation, migration, and renewal. Even in times of stress, people carried seeds, tools, stories, rituals, and language with them. A collapsing royal court is not the same as the death of a people. A deserted plaza is not the same as cultural extinction. The droughts at the edge of empire wounded cities, but human life sought new arrangements. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. We can read minerals in caves, but not the prayers spoken at their mouths. We can study lake cores, but not the fear in a mother's chest when stored maize ran low. We can date charcoal, but not the argument between families deciding whether to leave. We can map reservoirs, but not the last reflection of a thirsty child looking into muddy water. Science gives structure to the tragedy, but the full sorrow remains beyond recovery. The ancient Maya world teaches that environmental crisis rarely acts alone. It moves through society like water through cracked stone, finding weaknesses already present. It widens rivalries. It sharpens inequality. It challenges rulers. It unsettles belief. It turns local difficulties into regional transformations. In a world where kings claimed sacred power, drought could become an accusation written across the sky. The lake beds remember. The caves remember. The reservoirs remember. They tell of years when the rains were unreliable, when cities strained, when the old agreements between land, water, ruler, and people came under pressure. They do not give one final answer. They offer a warning instead. Civilizations are not separate from climate. They are built inside it, dependent upon rhythms they may understand, but never fully command. Above the ruins, rain still falls, sometimes gently, sometimes with tropical fury. It runs down temple steps, gathers in hollows, darkens limestone, and feeds the roots of trees growing through ancient walls. The water has returned, but not to the same world. The kings who begged for it are gone. The crowds who waited for it are gone. The reservoirs that once held it lie broken or buried. Only the evidence remains, patient and severe, telling us that even a civilization of astronomers, scribes, builders, and divine kings could be brought to the edge by the simplest need on earth, water. War among the Maya cities did not always announce itself with endless armies stretching across open plains. It did not resemble the imperial campaigns of later continents, with iron ranks and wheeled machines grinding toward a single capital. It moved through forests, along causeways, across rivers, between rival courts, and into the bodies of captives. It could be sudden, ritualized, strategic, intimate, and devastating. It could begin with ambition in a palace chamber and end with smoke rising over a defeated town. The Maya world was not one peaceful realm of astronomers gazing forever at the stars. It was a landscape of kingdoms. Each major city guarded its own dynasty. Gods, monuments, alliances, dependencies, and ambitions. Around the great centers clustered smaller communities, subordinate lords, market routes, agricultural zones, and contested borderlands. Prestige mattered, trade mattered, marriage mattered, captives mattered. So did memory. A victory could be carved into stone and made to outlive the warriors who fought it. A defeat could stain a royal line for generations. The holy cities competed beneath a shared sky. Tikal, Calakmul, Karakol, Naranjo, Dos Pilas, Palenque, Copan, Yaxchilan, and many others formed a shifting world of rivalry and alliance. No single kingdom held everything. Power rose and fell through coalitions, marriages, patronage, conquest, and betrayal. A city might flourish under one ruler and tremble under his son. A smaller kingdom might survive by aligning with a powerful neighbor, only to become a battlefield when great rivals turned against each other. War was political but also sacred. A ruler did not fight only for land. He fought for legitimacy. He fought to prove that divine favor had not deserted his house. He fought to bring captives into public ritual, where their suffering became evidence that the victorious king stood closer to cosmic order than his enemies. A battlefield triumph could become a ceremony. A captured noble could become a monument. Violence moved from forest path to plaza, from blood on the ground to text on stone. Imagine a royal court receiving news of an enemy movement. A messenger arrives breathless, face streaked with sweat and dust. He has crossed paths through forest, skirted wetlands, and past villages where people speak in fearful whispers. In the palace, nobles gather. A ruler sits among painted walls, surrounded by attendants, scribes, warriors, and ritual specialists. The report is not merely military, it is dynastic danger. A rival lord is testing the boundary. A vassal has shifted loyalty. A road is unsafe. A tribute caravan has been seized. The insult must be answered. Preparation begins. Weapons are checked. Obsidian edges are set into wood. Spears, darts, clubs, shields, and body coverings are prepared. Feathers and symbols identify rank. Priests consult the calendar, seeking an auspicious day or warning against a dangerous one. Scribes understand that if victory comes, it must be recorded correctly. Warriors do not march as anonymous bodies alone. They carry the reputation of a city. In the forest, warfare could be disorienting. Paths narrowed, visibility collapsed into green walls, heat pressed heavily upon the body. Insects swarmed. Water sources mattered. A force moving through such terrain had to know where it was going. Guides, scouts, local allies, and knowledge of roads were essential. A surprise attack could devastate a settlement before defenders fully gathered. A fortified center could resist, but only if food, water, and morale held. Fortifications tell their own story. Defensive walls, ditches, palisades, restricted approaches, and hastily built barriers at some sites suggest periods of insecurity. These were not cities entirely confident in ritual protection. They were communities that understood physical danger. When people build defenses, fear has become architectural. It has entered planning, labor, and daily movement. A wall is a confession in stone or earth. It says that enemies are expected. Some royal centers show evidence of burning. A palace floor blackened by fire is not an abstraction. It asks us to imagine flames licking wooden beams, smoke thickening inside rooms, plaster cracking, painted surfaces blistering, people running through courtyards, storage areas broken open, and sacred objects scattered or stolen. Fire in a palace is a political language. It announces that a ruling house has been humiliated. It turns architecture into a wound. The destruction of monuments could be even more deliberate. A carved stela represented more than stone. It held a ruler's image, name, title, date, and claim to sacred order. To break or deface it was to attack memory itself. The enemy did not need to kill every person to damage a kingdom. He could damage its story. He could strike the public body of kingship. He could make the plaza look defeated even after the warriors had gone. Captives were central to this world of symbolic violence. A captured lord was not merely a prisoner, he was proof. His body could be displayed beneath the feet of a victor, carved in stone, named in glyphs, humiliated before a watching crowd. His capture showed that his gods, ancestors, and allies had failed to protect him. In some cases, captives were sacrificed, their deaths folded into rituals of royal power. The event became both punishment and offering. To modern eyes, such practices can appear almost unbearable. Yet ancient politics across the world often fused violence with sacred meaning. The Maya were not uniquely cruel, nor were they innocent sages untouched by brutality. They were human beings living within systems where power required display, and display often required blood. Their art does not hide this. It shows bound bodies, victorious rulers, weapons, and ritualized defeat. Beauty and terror stand side by side. War also strained common life. When rulers fought, farmers suffered. Fields could be abandoned, houses burned, food stores seized. Men taken for military service might not return. Women, children, and elders endured displacement, hunger, and fear. Smaller communities caught between rival powers may have changed allegiance not out of ideology, but survival. The inscriptions celebrate royal victory, but they rarely speak of families hiding in darkness while warriors passed nearby. Trade could be disrupted. Routes that carried obsidian, jade, cacao, salt, feathers, shells, and cloth also carried risk. A hostile region could block movement. A defeated ally might no longer protect a road. Tribute expected by a royal court might fail to arrive. Without trusted exchange, elite life suffered. A court unable to acquire prestigious goods lost some of its splendor. A king without splendor could appear diminished. War, then, did not remain confined to battle. It moved into economics, ritual, architecture, agriculture, marriage, and memory. A single conflict could shift alliances across a region. A defeated king might flee, submit, be sacrificed, or rule under another power's shadow. A victorious ruler might gain prestige, but also new obligations. Conquest demands administration. Allies expect rewards. Captives must be displayed. Monuments must be commissioned. Victory is expensive. At times, the political landscape became a web of proxy conflict. A great power might support a smaller kingdom against a rival. Royal marriages could bind courts together, but also create claims and resentments. A city might be drawn into larger struggles that outlasted the rulers who began them. Names carved on monuments reveal not isolated battles, but chains of action and reaction. The Maya lowlands were alive with strategy. This competitive world may have strengthened cities during periods of growth. Rivalry encouraged monumental display. Kings built higher, carved more, staged grander ceremonies, and sought more spectacular victories. Competition could produce art, architecture, and historical record. But the same rivalry could become destructive when environmental stress, population pressure, or political instability increased. A system that rewarded aggressive display could find it difficult to step back from conflict. When drought pressed against the land, war may have sharpened. Scarce water, strained fields, anxious households, and weakened tribute systems made political relationships more fragile. A ruler facing internal doubt might seek external victory. A rival might attack a city already suffering. Borderlands might become more contested. Fortifications might spread. Defensive choices that once seemed unnecessary could become urgent. Fear passed from rumor into construction. The collapse of divine authority was not only a theological crisis, it was military. If a king could not defend his city, his sacred aura dimmed. If he lost captives instead of taking them, his monuments became accusations. If his palace burned, the smoke told a story no inscription could easily erase. If nobles doubted him, factions could form. If commoners fled, labor vanished. The ruler who once stood as the axis of order could become the center of failure. Some cities may have experienced internal violence as well. Not every destruction need come from a distant enemy. Revolt, factional struggle, dynastic conflict, and local rebellion can leave traces that are difficult to distinguish from external war. A palace burned by rival nobles and a palace burned by invading warriors may look similar in the earth. Archaeology must move carefully here, because fire and broken stone do not always name the hand that caused them. Still, the pattern of conflict is unmistakable. The Maya world contained war not as an occasional accident, but as a recurring feature of political life. It shaped kingship, art, settlement, fortification, and diplomacy. It gave rulers a language of triumph and enemies a language of erasure. It made captives into sacred currency and monuments into weapons of memory. Yet war did not destroy every Maya city at once. Some centers endured conflict and recovered. Some shifted power, some adapted, some were abandoned gradually, some were violently transformed. The end of royal authority in many places came through layered pressures, and war was one blade among many. But it was a sharp blade, and its cuts are visible. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. We do not know the full terror of a raid at night. We cannot hear the final conversation of a captured lord. We do not know how many people cursed the ambitions of kings while carrying food to armies. We do not know how many mothers waited for sons who never returned. The carved stones record victory. The earth records burning. The human grief between them is mostly lost. Stand in a Maya plaza and imagine it not as a quiet ruin, but as a place of tension. A monument rises at the center. On it, a ruler proclaims triumph. At its base, captives may once have knelt. Around the edges, nobles watched carefully, measuring their own chances in the political storm. Commoners stood farther back, seeing both sacred theater and the threat behind it. Drums sounded, smoke rose, a date was spoken. The city told itself that order had been restored. But order won through violence must be won again and again. That is the burden of holy cities at war. Each victory demands another proof. Each monument challenges rivals. Each captive creates memory among enemies. Each burned palace teaches survivors what can be done. The sacred world of the Maya was brilliant, disciplined, and profound. But it was not safe. In the end, the stones that count time also count conflict. They name kings who rose, fought, captured, dedicated, and died. They show us that beneath the mathematics of the calendar and the splendor of jade lay a political world as fierce as any in antiquity. Holy cities watched the stars, but they also watched one another. They prayed for rain, but they prepared for war. They carved eternity, but feared the next attack. And in that tension, between temple and battlefield, between incense and flame, between divine kingship and broken authority, the Maya world moved toward transformation. The silence did not fall everywhere at once. It moved unevenly, like shadow across a broken landscape. One city weakened while another still raised monuments. One royal court dissolved while another clung fiercely to ceremony. One plaza emptied while another filled with drums, incense, and the glitter of jade. The great southern silence was not a single collapse, not one last sunrise over all the Maya lowlands, not one final king stepping down from one final temple. It was slower, stranger, and more human than that. In the southern lowlands, where some of the most magnificent classic Maya cities had flourished, the rhythm of public kingship began to falter. The carved dates became fewer. Monument raising declined. Dynastic sequences grew uncertain. Palaces were damaged, abandoned, or reused in humbler ways. Elite spaces that had once controlled movement and ceremony lost their aura. In some cities, population shrank. In others, people shifted away from monumental centers toward smaller settlements or different regions. The old public voice of kingship weakened, and in many places, it stopped. A silent plaza is one of the most haunting images in history. Imagine a place once crowded on ceremonial days. The white floor gleamed in the sun. Scribes stood ready. Nobles wore embroidered garments and polished ornaments. Musicians beat drums. Incense thickened the air. Commoners watched from the edges, murmuring, sweating, waiting for the ruler to appear above them. The carved monuments around the plaza declared that the dynasty was ancient, chosen, victorious, and woven into sacred time. Then imagine the same place generations later. The plaster floor is cracked, grass grows in the seams, a fallen stone lies half buried. A stairway has begun to crumble at the edges. Birds nest in the high chambers. Rainwater gathers in shallow depressions. The royal house no longer commands the space. No new stela stands with fresh dates. No sculptor works beneath patronage. No crowd gathers in the old numbers. The plaza has not been destroyed in one dramatic gesture. It has been released into weather. That release is perhaps more unsettling than sudden ruin. The end of monumental life means that the social agreement sustaining it has failed. A pyramid does not maintain itself. A royal court does not feed itself. A calendar ceremony does not appear without specialists. Labor, stored food, political will, and belief. When the stones stop rising, something deeper has shifted. The network of obligations connecting farmer, artisan, noble, priest, warrior, scribe, and ruler has loosened. It is important not to imagine abandonment as emptiness from the first moment. People may have continued living among shrinking centers, scavenging materials, adapting old structures, occupying palace rooms without royal ceremony, or tending fields near monuments whose original meanings had begun to dim. A ruined city is rarely abandoned all at once. It can become a smaller place, then a memory place, then a dangerous place, then a sacred place, then a forested place. Time changes the function of stone. In some cities, elite compounds show signs of termination rituals. Objects were broken, buildings burned, offerings placed, and spaces closed in ways that suggest deliberate acts rather than random decay. A court ending its life might not simply walk away. It might ritually close a building, mark the death of a sacred space, or transform a palace from a living center into a place of memory. Destruction can be ceremonial as well as violent. To break an object may be to release it. To burn a room may be to end its power. Elsewhere, the evidence feels harsher. Burned structures, defensive works, hastily modified spaces, and interrupted construction suggest fear, conflict, and instability. A city under pressure may patch walls, restrict entrances, or retreat into defensible zones. Monumental confidence gives way to practical anxiety. The broad open plaza, once a place of display, becomes harder to protect. The very architecture of sacred openness may become a liability. The weakening of royal authority likely produced different experiences for different people. For nobles, it may have meant the loss of rank, luxury, protection, and identity. A family that had traced its power through dynastic connections could find those connections suddenly worthless. A courtier trained for ceremony might discover that no court remained to serve. A scribe whose art depended on elite patronage might have fewer commissions, fewer students, fewer reasons to carve or paint formal histories. For common households, the end of royal power could mean danger, but also release. A weakening court might demand more tribute, even when it could offer less protection. Labor obligations might become intolerable. Warfare might make fields unsafe. Religious ceremonies might lose persuasive force. Families may have chosen to move, not only because they were starving, but because the old political center no longer justified the cost of staying. To abandon a city can be an act of desperation, but also an act of judgment. The decision to leave must have been heavy. A house was not merely shelter. It contained hearth, memory, tools, gardens, pathways, and sometimes ancestors beneath the floor. To depart was to step away from the dead as well as the living. A family might carry portable goods, seeds, grinding stones, cloth, children, and stories. But they could not carry the house platform, the buried ancestors, the familiar trees, the view of the temple above morning mist. Migration is not only movement across land, it is a wound in memory. The forest returned with patience. It began in cracks and corners. Seeds lodged in plaster. Roots explored joints between stones. Vines climbed walls. Soil gathered on flat surfaces. Saplings rose from courtyards. Birds brought more seeds. Rain softened mortar. The city, once a human order imposed on landscape, slowly entered another order. The jungle did not conquer in anger. It absorbed. It covered the evidence of human ambition with leaf, shade, and green breathing life. This has misled many later observers. A forested ruin can look like a city defeated by nature, but the forest was never simply outside Maya civilization. The Maya lived with it, used it, managed it, feared it, and honored it. What changed was not nature returning to a place where it had never been. What changed was the collapse of the human systems that kept walls cleared, plazas swept, reservoirs maintained, roofs repaired, and paths open. Maintenance is civilization's quiet heartbeat. When it stops, roots become historians. The silence of the South also carried sound elsewhere. People moved, traditions moved, objects moved, sacred knowledge moved. Not everything ended in the abandoned centers. Communities in other regions, especially farther north, continued to develop, build, trade, and worship. The decline of many southern lowland kingdoms was not the death of Maya civilization as a whole. It was a transformation of political geography. Power shifted, populations reorganized. The sacred map changed. This distinction matters. When modern people say the Maya vanished, they often compress centuries of varied experience into one misleading word. Royal courts collapsed in many southern cities. Monumental inscription traditions declined. Populations moved or decreased in certain regions. But Maya life continued. The people who left one city did not cease to exist. They became ancestors somewhere else. They carried language, farming knowledge, ritual practice, and memory into new arrangements. Still, the silence in the abandoned plazas remains real. There is a special sorrow in places built for crowds that no longer gather them. Stairways designed for processions become perches for lizards. Palaces built for negotiation become shelters for bats. Temples raised for gods become hills beneath trees. The city does not die like a person. It changes states. It passes from living institution to ruin, from ruin to landmark, from landmark to mystery, from mystery to excavation. Archaeologists approach such places with careful questions. When did the last monument rise? When did construction stop? Were buildings burned? Were houses abandoned gradually or suddenly? Did people return to perform rituals among ruins? Did population decline sharply or shift location? What happened to water systems? Were elite goods still present? Did common households persist after royal authority failed? Each question adds texture to the silence. The answers vary from site to site. Some cities show signs of violent disruption. Others suggest gradual contraction. Some elite spaces were destroyed while surrounding populations continued for a time. Some areas were reoccupied later. Some ruins became places of memory long after their political power ended. There was no single Maya ending, but many endings, braided together by climate stress, warfare, political failure, economic strain, and human choice. This complexity does not weaken the drama. It deepens it. A single catastrophe is easy to imagine. A long transformation is harder because it asks us to see history through many eyes. The king who cannot command loyalty, the scribe whose patron disappears, the farmer deciding whether to plant near a failing city, the noble woman leaving a palace chamber for the last time, the child who grows up knowing the old plaza not as a living center, but as a place adults mention with unease, the hunter generations later who passes a vine-covered monument and knows it belongs to powers older than his own time. Only time will tell what future discoveries will be made. Beneath the forest floor, more endings wait to be understood. A sealed room may hold the last offerings of a dynasty. A burned layer may reveal the violence of a final siege. A humble house may show that ordinary families remained long after elites disappeared. A reservoir bed may preserve the memory of drought in its final years of use. A glyphic fragment may name one more ruler standing at the edge of silence. The great Southern silence is not an absence of history. It is history in a lower voice. It speaks through missing monuments, abandoned courtyards, unfinished buildings, broken objects, shifted settlements, and forests grown over stone. It asks us to imagine not only the grandeur of a civilization, but the painful process by which grandeur becomes memory. It reminds us that collapse is not always a door slamming shut. Sometimes it is a series of footsteps leaving a plaza, each one softer than the last, and then, at last, only rain remains, rain on empty steps, rain in roofless rooms, rain dripping from leaves where banners once moved, rain filling the hollows of carved stones whose dates still face the sky. The kings are gone from those cities, the scribes are gone, the old crowds are gone, but the stones remain, and the forest remains, and the silence remains, deep enough to hold 1,000 unanswered names. The Maya did not vanish. That sentence must stand like a carved stone in the center of the story, because so much misunderstanding has gathered around the old cities. Temples were abandoned, yes. Royal courts failed, yes. In many places, the public voice of divine kingship fell silent, and jungle roots entered the palaces. But a broken throne is not the death of a people. An empty plaza is not the end of a civilization. A ruined city can mislead the eye into believing that life itself has departed, when in truth life has moved, changed, endured, and taken new forms. The ancient Maya world survived beyond the ruins. It survived in villages, fields, languages, rituals, memory, and bloodlines. It survived in families who continued to plant maize beneath the same great sky. It survived in people who still knew the forest paths, the sacred hills, the hidden waters, the old places where offerings had been made. It survived in hands that shaped clay, wove cloth, cooked food, raised children, and told stories in the night. It survived not as a museum shadow, but as living humanity. To understand this survival, we must release the idea that civilization exists only where monuments rise. Stone is visible, but life is wider than stone. The Maya world had always included more than royal capitals. It included hamlets, market towns, farming communities, ritual caves, coastlines, mountain routes, gardens, wetlands, and households far from the carved center. When certain cities declined, many people did not disappear into nothingness. They reorganized, they migrated, they joined other communities. They adapted to altered political landscapes. They carried what mattered with them. Imagine a family leaving a weakened city. They do not carry a temple. They cannot carry the painted walls of a palace or the carved monuments of kings, but they carry seeds, they carry tools, they carry grinding stones if they can bear the weight. They carry children. They carry knowledge of planting, cooking, healing, weaving, and building. They carry the names of ancestors. They carry fears about the old place, perhaps grief, perhaps relief. They carry songs no archaeologist will ever hear. They carry the unseen architecture of a culture inside memory. This is how worlds continue, not always through palaces, but through habits, not always through monuments, but through meals, not always through written histories, but through repeated acts taught by one generation to the next. A civilization can lose kings and keep its language. It can lose temples and keep its gods in altered form. It can lose a capital and keep its sense of place. It can pass through catastrophe and remain itself, though never unchanged. The northern Maya regions reveal this clearly. While many southern lowland centers declined, other cities rose, expanded, or transformed. Places in the Yucatan Peninsula became powerful centers of political, religious, and commercial life. Urban traditions did not end. Architecture continued. Trade continued. Ceremonies continued. New styles appeared. New alliances formed, and new forms of authority emerged. The center of gravity shifted, as it has so often in human history. This is not merely survival after disaster, it is transformation. The Maya world entered new centuries with altered cities, changing political systems, and widened connections. Coastal trade became increasingly important in some regions. Ports, roads, marketplaces, and exchange routes linked communities in new patterns. Goods moved across land and water. Salt, cacao, cotton, obsidian, ceramics, feathers, and other valued materials continued to circulate. Merchants, travelers, and messengers carried news as well as objects. Where royal divine kingship weakened in some areas, other forms of authority took shape. Councils, noble houses, military orders, merchant groups, local lords, and religious specialists may all have played roles in different regions and periods. No single model explains every Maya community. This diversity was one of the strengths of Maya survival. The people were not dependent on one empire, one capital, or one royal line. They belonged to a flexible cultural world capable of adapting when one political form failed. Yet survival was not gentle. The centuries brought new pressures, new conflicts, and eventually the devastating arrival of Europeans. Spanish conquest did not encounter an empty land. It encountered Maya communities with languages, towns, rulers, fields, temples, books, markets, memory, and power of their own. The invaders did not discover a vanished people. They confronted living societies, some fractured, some resistant, some diplomatic, some armed, all existing within histories far older than the newcomers understood. The violence of conquest was profound. Battles, forced labor, disease, displacement, religious destruction, tribute demands, and colonial rule reshaped Maya life. Sacred books were burned. Temples were attacked or converted. Communities were reorganized. Native authorities were pressured, replaced, or absorbed into colonial systems. The Old World was not simply continued unchanged. It was wounded deeply, and yet, still, the Maya endured. They endured through resistance, adaptation, concealment, negotiation, and memory. Some practices were hidden beneath new forms. Some sacred places continued to matter under different names or within altered rituals. Languages persisted in homes, fields, markets, and songs. Communities carried older ways through colonial darkness, not untouched, but not erased. The endurance itself is one of the great facts of world history. This is why the word vanished is dangerous. It turns living people into ghosts. It makes descendants invisible beneath the romance of ruins. It suggests that the true Maya belong only to the ancient past, while modern Maya communities become somehow separate from their own inheritance. That is false. The ancient cities are part of a long story. But the story did not end when certain stelae ceased to be carved. Modern Maya peoples live across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and beyond. They speak numerous Maya languages. They farm, teach, write, organize, worship, study, migrate, build, and remember. Some maintain traditional knowledge connected to agriculture, healing, weaving, timekeeping, and sacred landscapes. Others live in cities, work in modern professions, produce scholarship, art, literature, film, and political movements. There is no single way to be Maya, just as there was no single ancient Maya kingdom. Continuity does not require stillness. A people may change and remain real. Languages evolve, rituals adapt, clothing styles shift, political conditions transform, beliefs are reinterpreted, communities move. Survival is not the freezing of a culture in an ancient pose. Survival is the ability to remain human through change, to carry identity through pressure, to remember enough while making life possible in new circumstances. The ruins themselves became part of this living landscape. For some local communities, ancient sites were never meaningless stones. They were known, named, feared, respected, used, avoided, or remembered. Outsiders might call them lost, but local memory often held them in other ways. A mound might be a place of ancestors. A cave might remain sacred. A broken temple might be part of a story told at dusk. Archaeology often arrives with instruments and notebooks, but it does not arrive to a land without memory. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. We do not know every route by which families moved from failing cities. We do not know how every ritual changed under pressure. We cannot trace each song from ancient plaza to colonial village to modern household. We cannot recover every act of quiet resistance, every hidden offering, every whispered story, every grandmother who preserved a word that might otherwise have died. Survival often leaves traces too delicate for stone, but the evidence of endurance is everywhere. It is in language, it is in maize fields, it is in woven patterns, it is in ceremonies linked to rain, earth, saints, ancestors, mountains, caves, and the sacred powers of place. It is in communities that refuse to become footnotes to their own ruins. It is in modern voices correcting the old myth of disappearance. The Maya past should not be imagined as a golden age sealed behind glass. It was a human world, full of brilliance and suffering, wisdom and violence, beauty and inequality. The Maya present is human as well, full of change, struggle, creativity, loss, and renewal. To honor the ancient cities properly, one must also honor the people who still live in the long shadow of those stones. A temple abandoned in the forest is haunting. A living language spoken near that temple is more powerful still. The ancient Maya did not vanish into the jungle mist. Their political orders changed. Their cities rose and fell. Their books were burned. Their communities suffered conquest and oppression, but they remained. They remained in the planting of corn, in the naming of children, in the memory of sacred places, in the persistence of speech, in the refusal of identity to die. Only time will tell what future discoveries will be made, but one truth is already clear. The ruins are not tombstones for an extinct people. They are chapters in a longer life. The stones speak of kings, calendars, battles, and gods. But the living descendants speak of endurance. Between them lies the real Maya story. Not disappearance, but transformation beneath the pressure of centuries. And in that survival, there is a dignity greater than legend. There is a certain hour, deep in the night, when the past feels closer than it should. The world outside grows quiet. The noise of the present withdraws. A single lamp burns beside a chair. Rain taps softly against glass, or wind moves in the dark beyond the wall. In such an hour, it is possible to imagine the ancient Maya cities not as ruins in distant forests, but as living places beneath the same turning heavens that now watch over us. It is possible to hear drums in empty plazas, voices on temple stairways, the scrape of a scribe's brush, the grinding of maize before dawn, the breath of a king standing before his people in a weight of jade, feathers, and fear. Time is the oldest road humanity has ever walked. The Maya understood this with a depth that still unsettles us. They did not treat time as a blank line running from birth to death. They saw it as patterned, layered, sacred, and alive with return. Days carried character. Planets moved with consequence. Anniversaries mattered. Rituals did not simply mark time. They entered it, shaped it, negotiated with it, and placed human life within something vaster than a single generation. This is why their calendars continue to fascinate the modern mind. Not because they possessed some simple magical power to see our future, but because they created one of the great meditations on time in world history. They counted days with precision. They joined numbers to gods, rulers to cycles, memory to stone, and the sky to the fate of cities. They made human events feel answerable to cosmic rhythm. In a world of uncertainty, they listened for pattern. We still do this, though often with different instruments. We watch markets, weather systems, satellites, elections, medical scans, climate models, and distant stars. We collect data because uncertainty frightens us. We make predictions because the future is the darkness into which all civilizations walk. We may no longer climb a temple to greet Venus as an omen of war. Yet we still seek signs. We still ask what is coming. We still hope that calculation can protect us from chaos. The Maya remind us that prediction is never the same as control. A civilization can measure the heavens and still suffer drought. It can carve dates into stone and still lose dynasties. It can build reservoirs and still thirst. It can raise temples and still face war, hunger, political fracture, and fear. Knowledge is powerful, but it does not make human beings invulnerable. The sky can be understood and still remain beyond command. This is not a lesson in failure. It is a lesson in humility. The Maya world was not fragile because its people lacked intelligence. It was fragile because all human worlds are fragile. Every society depends on agreements between environment, labor, belief, authority, memory, and hope. When those agreements hold, cities rise. When they weaken, even the greatest stones cannot guarantee permanence. A civilization is not a monument. It is a living arrangement, renewed every day or slowly lost. The ruins make this truth visible: a palace without rulers, a reservoir without water-bearers, a temple without procession, a road without footsteps. These are not merely picturesque remains. They are questions made of stone. What did people trust? What did they fear? What did they believe would last? What did they sacrifice to keep their world alive? What warnings were ignored? What warnings were understood too late? Yet it would be wrong to end only in melancholy. The Maya story is also a story of endurance. The cities changed, but the people continued. Languages survived. Communities adapted. Corn was planted again. Children were born. Memory crossed war, drought, migration, conquest, and colonial violence. The ancient monuments are not the remains of a vanished humanity. They are part of a continuing inheritance, one carried by living Maya peoples whose existence is itself a refusal of disappearance. This should change the way we look at ruins. We should not see them only as beautiful failures. We should see them as witnesses. They witness brilliance and inequality, devotion and violence, calculation and mystery, collapse and survival. They remind us that history is not a clean procession from primitive to advanced, from darkness to light, from them to us. The ancient Maya were our intellectual equals, thinking with different tools, different gods, different assumptions, and different obligations. Their world was not lesser than ours. It was another answer to the problem of being human. Stand in imagination in a Maya plaza at twilight. The heat of the day withdraws from the stones. Bats begin to move through the air. The forest darkens at the edges. A temple rises above you, its stairway steep and silent. Somewhere in the canopy, birds settle. The first stars appear. Venus may soon burn near the horizon. The same bright traveler watched by priests, farmers, queens, scribes, warriors, children, and captives across centuries. The stone beneath your feet was once swept clean. The walls were once painted. The air once smelled of incense, sweat, flowers, rain, and smoke. Now the place is quiet, but quiet is not emptiness. The silence contains effort. It contains the hands that quarried limestone, mixed plaster, painted glyphs, cooked meals, dressed rulers, buried children, sharpened obsidian, planted maize, and lifted water from reservoirs. It contains prayers for rain. It contains the cries of captives and the songs of festivals. It contains the fear of drought, the pride of victory, the grief of departure, and the stubborn work of survival. Still, for the most part, secrets remain hidden. The jungle keeps them. The soil keeps them. The caves keep them in cool darkness. The unread fragments keep them. The lost books keep them by their absence. Archaeology gives us radiocarbon dating, stratigraphic excavation, lithic analysis, genomic data, LiDAR maps, pollen records, and careful translations of glyphs. These tools have opened extraordinary windows, but they have not opened every chamber. The past remains generous and guarded. Only time will tell what future discoveries will be made. Somewhere, perhaps beneath a collapsed temple, a sealed tomb waits in darkness. Somewhere under forest roots, an inscription may preserve a name not spoken for 1,200 years. Somewhere in a cave, offerings still lie where hands placed them in fear or gratitude. Somewhere in the living memory of a community, an old story may carry the echo of a sacred landscape older than empires. History is not finished with the Maya world. It is still unfolding. And what of us? We, too, live inside calendars. We, too, build systems we hope will endure. We, too, watch the climate with unease. We, too, trust leaders, question leaders, feed cities, fight wars, gather data, tell stories, raise children, and fear the day when our own monuments might stand without us. The distance between their world and ours is vast, but not absolute. Across that distance, recognition travels. The Maya do not offer a prophecy of our doom. They offer something more demanding. They offer a mirror. They ask us to consider how knowledge and belief shape society, how power dresses itself as certainty, how environmental stress tests every institution, how memory can survive destruction, and how no people should ever be reduced to ruins alone. They ask us to listen carefully before we speak of vanishing. For the Maya did not vanish. Their cities changed, their dynasties ended, their books burned, their sacred stones weathered under rain. But their descendants remain, and the old questions remain with them. How shall human beings live beneath a sky they can study but not command? How shall communities survive when rain fails, rulers falter, and old certainties crack? How shall memory endure when stone itself begins to crumble? Answerless, adrift to ponder, we return from the jungle not with a single solution, but with a deeper reverence. The Maya measured time, and time measured them. They watched the stars, and the stars watched their cities rise and fall. They carved names in stone, and stone carried those names through silence. They built a world of corn, rain, blood, jade, mathematics, music, and sacred fear. It was magnificent. It was vulnerable. It was human. And now, as night gathers around us, perhaps that is the final gift of their story. Not the fantasy of perfect prophecy, not the romance of disappearance, not the easy lesson of collapse, but the knowledge that every civilization, no matter how brilliant, is made of mortal hands reaching toward permanence. Some reach with stone, some reach with song, some reach with memory, and somewhere, beneath the taba trees and the slow wheeling stars, the ancient Maya still seemed to whisper The time is never empty. It is filled with those who came first, those who remain, and those who listen in the dark.